Chapter 429. After arranging everything properly, Jiang Pingji heaved a sigh of relief. However, it was not the time to be completely at ease. Now that the world was in chaos, the only way to protect oneself was to strengthen oneself. She still had to prepare some city defense equipment to turn the entire Xiangyang district into an impenetrable fortress. Then she would not have to fear the harassment of the Xingyi army. The honest Li Yun noticed the tiredness on everyone's faces and asked curiously. Jiang Pingji sighed. The Xiangyang district has gone through 3 major disasters. Now everything is being done. There is a shortage of people everywhere. The people need to be properly settled, the destroyed houses need to be rebuilt, and the wasteland outside needs to be reclaimed. Otherwise, I don't know how many people will starve to death next year. Capable people do more work. Even if I'm tired, it can't be helped. I can only use one person like 2 and try my best to do it. Li Yun was a helpful person. Otherwise, he would not have helped his troops resist the Xingyi army's pursuit. Not only that, he did not realize Jiang Pingji's sinister intentions in inviting him to the Xiangyang district. Listening to Jiang Pingji's sincere words, Li Yun's heart softened. His warm and kind nature could not help but show itself. His eyes were filled with sincerity. He asked Jiang Pingji, "Is there a shortage of people here, Langjun? Although I am not good with brains, I have some strength. If you need my help, feel free to let me know." Finishing his words, he smiled shyly. He knew the district magistrate was not a small official. His words implied that he could not wait any longer. Feng Jin, Su Ku and Meng Hun did not leave. They secretly looked at Li Yun as if they had seen a ghost. Which corner of the world did this simple-minded child come from? The Xiangyang district was hell on earth. They worked overtime until they wanted to die. The few of them had boarded the pirate ship and could not get off. Why did Li Yun want to harm them and seek abuse? Jiang Pingji said bluntly, "There is, but I'm afraid that a celestial being like Langjun is not suitable for it." Li Yun blushed and said, "You don't have to call me Langjun. Just call me Li Hanmei." As for the description of celestial being, it really made him feel embarrassed. Yun was a beauty. Li Yun's courtesy name Hanmei did not let his face down. "All right, then I won't stand on ceremony." Jiang Pingji replied readily. Under the criticism of the audience in the streaming room, she still opened her mouth. "There is indeed something that needs to be done. If Han Mei doesn't mind, I'll have to trouble you with this matter." "Don't worry, I'm not afraid of hardship." Li Yun was an honest child, this could be seen in all aspects. When he picked up his gun, he was an aloof Prince Charming. When he put it down, he was a naive and sweet boy who could be bullied by Jiang Pingji. In the end, Jiang Pingji left the task of reclaiming the land to Li Yun. That's right, she had sent a male god with outstanding marksmanship, who was like a killing god, to farm. Dalao Raoming. "Hee streamer, come on, tell me your home address, I will definitely send you razors." Xiao. "Oh my god, I can't imagine idly working in the fields like a farmer." Buan Jiaging Xianxia. "Host, you're really good at letting a future general on the battlefield work in the fields. Why don't you just sit there and fly to the sky?" Feng Jin and the others were tired. They wanted to leave, but they suddenly remembered something important and told Jiang Pingji. "Oh right. My lord, the bricks have been produced." "Brick kiln? The bricks have been produced? What's the result?" Jiang Pingji held her heavy head. Hearing Feng Jin's words, her mind suddenly became clear. "The craftsmen have taken out the bricks, but whether they can be used or not, my lord, you have to look first. After all, it was his lord's creation, she had the most say. Let's go to the brick kiln to take a look." Jiang Pingji gave up on the idea of resting and brought the others to the kiln. The old man who fired the pottery was now the head craftsman of the kiln. Hearing that Jiang Pingji had arrived, he hurriedly led the others out to welcome her. "Since my lord left for the war, 3 batches of bricks have been fired. Now the 4th batch is being fired in the kiln." The head craftsman of the kiln led Jiang Pingji to see the first 3 batches of finished bricks. The bricks were greenish-gray in color and were neatly stacked into a pile, taking up a large area. The first batch of bricks had more cracks, but the next 2 batches had fewer cracks. They looked more orderly and beautiful. Jiang Pingji weighed the bricks in her hand, then split them open with her palm to check the lines inside. Almost there. Overall, the quality of the bricks fired in the last few batches was not bad. It was considered a success for the first firing to have such a quality. She could also see that the quality of the later batches was much better than the previous ones. It was evident that the head craftsman of the kiln took this matter seriously. After firing a batch, he tried his best to find the flaws in it and then improved it further. Continue firing. When the entire Xiangyang district starts to take shape, you will be greatly rewarded. The head craftsman of the kiln was beaming. The amount of bricks needed to rebuild Xiangyang district was not small. In order to increase the scale, Jiang Pingji specially ordered people to build 2 more kilns to fire day and night. The coal needed for firing bricks was gone. She also ordered people to purchase it from the neighboring Qingda County at a relatively low price. With the bricks, it was easier to build houses. With the addition of thousands of laborers, the construction progress was sped up. Friendship is worth 3 coins. It's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. A month later, Jiang Pingji took out a few brand new land deeds and house deeds and placed them in front of the few of them. When Feng Jin and the others saw it, the nerves at the corners of their mouths almost broke. There was no other reason. They were all too clear about the location of the land deeds. 3 coins. Qiguan Rang took out 3 coins from his sleeves and took one of them. Feng Jin touched his money pouch and the corner of his mouth twitched. It was either gold or silver. It was difficult to find 3 copper coins. Fortunately, Suku had some in stock and lent him 3 coins. Not long after, the few land deeds were divided up. The last few were almost snatched. What a joke. If they didn't snatch, the good spots would be taken by others. 1-story buildings were popular nowadays. Houses were built very quickly. However, considering the size of the house, Jiang Pingji combined the architectural styles of Hejian County and Shangjing. With the advice and suggestions from her friends in the streaming room, everyone worked together to make full use of the space. They made an exquisite and elegant 2-sectioned and 3-sectioned house of 2 sizes. The area was not very big, but it was exquisite and elegant. It was neat and beautiful. Even Feng Jin, who was used to seeing the world, could not help but praise the small houses. The first batch of small houses was about to be completed. Jiang Pingji played a selfish trick and gave benefits to her subordinates who worked overtime until they cried. The land deeds originally belonged to the district headquarters. Jiang Pingji bought one with 1 coin and sold it to her subordinates for 3 coins. She had no choice. She was poor. She could not reward her subordinates with anything good. However, it did not matter. She had a house that was about to be completed. House and land deeds were sold at a discount of 3 coins. The viewers in the streaming room almost cried their eyes out when they saw it. Chapter 430. Heshibi Haogui. #laugh to tears. 3 coins of land and house deed. This house price is heaven. Yeoyibakian. Heaven in my dreams. I wouldn't dare to be so bold even in my dreams. Don't casually tease. It's not only heaven, even the news broadcast wouldn't dare to put it this way. 3 coins. My dear friends, that's not even $3 in our hands. Have any of you calculated the area of that 2-level house? Even if the streamer is a wolf, tiger, leopard and cries from working overtime, I want to cross over and hug her thighs. Author, she doesn't want jogging. Bah, what do you mean by that? The 2-level house is more than 400 square meters. This is a small house. What's my 100 square meter 2-story villa? Toilet? But this house price is ridiculous. Streamer, let me cross over and hug your thighs, okay? As long as you give me 3 coins of a 2-level house, let alone a month of overtime, even if it's a year, whoever frowns is a dog. Kizaduo. Let alone a year, even if it's 10 years, I'm willing. Kizaduo. I'm willing to work 10 years, let alone a year. She doesn't want jogging. Xianxia. Am I the only one who noticed that the streamer earned 2 coins? She bought the land and house deed for 1 coin and sold it for 3 coins. She earned twice as much in one go. To be honest, Jiang Pingji was a good streamer. Although she had a bad temper, she was hardworking. From waking up in the morning to sleeping at night, no matter what happened. Especially after the earthquake in Shangjing, Jiang Pingji was so tired that her daily broadcasting time increased to more than 15 hours, reaching a peak of 24 hours. Feng Jin and the rest were working overtime, but she was not idle either. However, her skin was too good. Even after staying up for 4 to 5 consecutive days, she did not have any dark circles or eye bags. The audience was quite envious at first, but then they realized that her subordinates did not believe that she was working so hard, and they immediately convulsed with laughter. It was only at such times that the unscrupulous audience would sympathize with Jiang Pingji a little. For a month, the construction of Xiangyang district was carried out in an orderly manner. From the center of the district to the surrounding areas, the first batch of exquisite houses was almost completed. When the group left, Meng Hun ran to catch up with Feng Jin and asked shyly, "Mr. Feng, can you exchange a card with me?" Feng Jin was startled. If he remembered correctly, Meng Hun had taken a 3-sectioned house, while he had a 2-sectioned house. There was a huge difference in size between the two houses. Wasn't it a huge loss to trade a 3-sectioned house for a 2-sectioned house? He explained, "Anyway, I'm just a loner. It's not convenient for me to live alone in a big place." Although Meng Hun was a martial artist, he was a meticulous person. He didn't react in time, but he soon realized that he had messed up. Jiang Pingji had obviously considered each person's family when she took out the deed of the house and the deed of the land. Those who were already married would be allocated a 3-way house, while those who were single would be allocated a 2-way house. Jiang Pingji acted too quickly. It seemed like she had taken away the house that originally belonged to Feng Jin. Of course, he had to change it back now to avoid any unhappiness and filth. Meng Hun scratched his head and said, "Teacher's house is still under construction, so the noise will be quite loud. I reckon it will disturb my niece and sister-in-law. I'm a man, so I don't mind. The sound of construction is not even as loud as my snoring." Feng Jin smiled and exchanged the deed to the land and house with the other party. In a month's time, Xiangyang district had turned from decadent to prosperous. As he walked out of the district headquarters, the ground beneath his feet was unusually flat. Even if a horse carriage of inferior quality drove on it, the people in the carriage wouldn't feel the slightest jolt. This was something that even Shangjing in the past couldn't achieve. This was because the bricks used to pave the road were green bricks fired in a brick kiln. The scale was different from the green bricks used to build houses. It was wider and thicker. Of course, from Feng Jin's point of view, it was really extravagant. Although the green bricks themselves weren't worth much, the rarer they were, the more valuable they were. He followed the address on the land deed and took a look at the future house. It was still outside the courtyard. He could see the neat green tiles when he lifted his head slightly. As soon as he entered the courtyard, there was a stone road paved with green bricks in the middle that led straight to the hall. The doors and windows of the hall and the wing rooms on both sides hadn't been installed yet. It looked empty. The diamond-patterned wooden window on the side corridor was slightly open. Other than the grain of the wood itself, there weren't any artificial carvings. Overall, it looked clean and refreshing. Further ahead, he entered the inner courtyard. With just a glance, he could tell that the layout of the house was the most popular nowadays. The overall building wasn't very big, but it was well lit. There was a small courtyard inside. It was bare now. If a rockery was placed, a small pond was dug, some pets could be raised, and some fish could be fished by the pond in the hot summer days. It would be extremely enjoyable and pleasant. Feng Jin walked around thinking about how to improve it. Changxing was almost 3 months old. If she got any older, her range of activities wouldn't be restricted to one place. This child seemed to be blessed by the heavens. From birth until now, she hadn't suffered any illnesses or disasters. One had to know that Feng Jin himself was dizzy for 2 days. He only recovered after taking some medicine. He entered the hall again. As soon as he looked up, he found something that interested him. The earthquake in Shangjing. If Jiang Pingji hadn't stood up to save Wei Jingxian and her daughter, Feng Jin would be a widower now. Every time he thought about it, he felt a lingering fear. He even had a slight fear of houses. Now that he looked up, he found the house interesting. It was very different from the houses he usually saw. Of course it was different. Although mortise and tenon were used in the buildings of this era, they were still in the early stages of development. They weren't that strong and the technology wasn't mature. When Jiang Pingji was working on the house, she studied it with the audience in the streaming room for a long time. With their help and Jiang Pingji's own efforts, she applied the mature mortise and tenon to these new buildings. The shockproof ability was definitely hundreds of times better than the previous jerry-built projects. Feng Jin left the house in a good mood. As soon as he went out, he saw Su Ku and Qiguan Rang walking over from not far away. The 3 of them bumped into each other. When they looked again, their houses were almost on the same street. Qiguan Rang still looked tired. "Huayu, why don't we borrow some craftsmen from the Lord and tidy up the inner courtyard first?" After Feng Jin and Su Ku worked overtime crazily, their work was back on track. During this period of time, they finally relaxed a little. Feng Jin even had time to visit his wife and child. Only Qiguan rang. He wished he could roll up his bedding and stay at his workplace. The household registration was cumbersome. The current household registration system had too many unreasonable and chaotic areas. Jiang Pingji supported him to set up a new household registration system. Although Qiguan Rang was a little tempted if he did so, it would be tantamount to going against his principle of keeping a low profile. Feng Jin said, "It's nothing. There's no need to trouble the Lord with such a small matter. I still have some servants who can tidy it up." No matter what, Feng Jin was still the Langjun of the Feng family. He still had a family. After looking at the house, Feng Jin went to the temporary residence. Wei Jingxian, who had recovered, was hugging her child and coaxing her. She was humming an elegant and graceful tune. Chongqing was still fair and chubby. She looked even cuter. Chapter 431. Huayu's back. Chongqing, your father's back. Wei Jingxian got up from the table. Feng Jin took the opportunity to take Chongqing, who was leaning towards him. This girl was very alert and had a good memory. The last time Feng Jin came back was 5 days ago. This child was very clingy. Feng Jin said, "I just went to see the house that my lord gave me. It's not bad. I heard the servants mention it. It said that even the road in that area is paved with green bricks. How could the people of today have seen something like green bricks? When the road was first built, there were even people who stole the green bricks on the ground in the middle of the night." Jiang Pingji was almost angry. Later she caught a few of them and punished them severely. "It's the same in our house. It looks very clean. It's much easier for the servants to clean." Feng Jin teased Chongqing. She grabbed his finger and wanted to stuff it into her mouth. Unfortunately, she was young and did not have teeth. It did not hurt even after biting for a long time. Feng Jin only felt that his finger was itchy. "Tomorrow, get the servants to clean up the new house. First, tidy up the inner courtyard. It's really unfair for you and Chongqing to live here." Feng Jin sighed and took his finger out of his daughter's mouth. Chongqing was very unhappy. She shouted at him as if she was angry. She was young but had a bad temper. She wanted to scratch him because of a disagreement. Wei Jingxian said with a big heart, "What's there to be upset about?" The place they lived in now was a few times smaller than the courtyard she had before she got married, but she did not feel aggrieved. The current Xiangyang district was basically a different place every day. Wei Jingxian looked at its changes and actually felt proud of it. 09 Xiao Shounet, her husband, played a part in the development of this place. Of course she was proud. At the beginning of the reconstruction, everything was chaotic. There was almost no rules. Now that it had been a month, everyone was used to this change. The planned wide roads were also moved to the construction schedule. At present it was beginning to take shape. Jiang Pingji, as the district magistrate, issued a few new government decrees. However, these decrees were somewhat amusing to the ordinary people. The first decree was to keep to the right when walking on the street. The second decree was not to spit or urinate anywhere. The third decree was to not go on the street shirtless regardless of whether it was winter or summer. It was a disgrace. Apart from these trivial matters, there were also some very strict laws. Illegal organizations without official permission were not allowed to buy or sell human beings. If they violated the law, they would be banished and their properties confiscated. Regardless of whether it was a man or a woman, having sex with an outsider during the term of marriage would be treated as a felony. There were dozens of them and the number was increasing every day. At first the people were still trembling with fear, but after a long time they calmed down. In any case, it wasn't a tyranny. This district magistrate was doing quite well, much better than the previous one. However, there was one law that made many old people feel uncomfortable. Relatives and elders are not allowed to decide the life and death of the younger generation at will. They will be punished as murder. Jiang Pingji was criticized by many people for being a busybody. They secretly said that she was a busybody. It was purely a coincidence that this law was written. About 20 days ago, Xiangyang district was still in a state of chaos. Jiang Pingji only slept for an hour for 7 to 8 days in a row. She was so tired that she felt like she was floating. When she was patrolling outside the city, she saved a crazy young woman who was hugging a pillow and jumping into the water. She decisively went into the water and saved her. After asking for the reason, she was so angry that her mind was clear. It turned out that 3 years before the woman married into her husband's family, She gave birth to 3 daughters in a row. Strangely, all 3 daughters died before they were even a month old. At first she thought that she was unlucky and couldn't keep her children. Later she accidentally discovered that the children were secretly killed by her mother-in-law. The reason was also very absurd. It was because the mother-in-law didn't want a granddaughter who lost money. She spoke righteously. If it was a grandson, how could she bear to kill them? The feng shui of the scoundrel woman's belly was not good. She couldn't even give birth to a child. The woman was anxious and reported her mother-in-law. However, the district magistrate didn't convict her mother-in-law. Instead, he said that the woman was unfilial and beat her. Since then, the woman's mind was in a mess. She became crazy and told everyone she met that her mother-in-law killed her 3 granddaughters. More than 10 months ago, the husband got the widow next door pregnant and she gave birth to a boy. Her mother-in-law ordered her husband to divorce the woman and make her give up her position as the legal wife. Otherwise, she would be demoted to a concubine. When the viewers in the streaming room heard this, they reacted fiercely. They wanted to crawl over and slap the mother-in-law to death. If the old woman was so capable, why didn't she just go to heaven? Jiang Pingji's mentality was about to explode. She went back and added 2 more. One was that adulterers would receive a heavier sentence. The other was that it was also considered murder if a relative killed someone of the same bloodline. The woman hadn't separated from the man yet. She was still the man's legal wife. If the man got the widow pregnant, it was considered rape. The mother-in-law had personally admitted to killing her 3 granddaughters. The district headquarters still had the records. It was considered murder. She didn't care about the commotion outside. She directly ordered people to arrest the strange mother and son and sentence them accordingly. Interestingly, this matter attracted the condemnation of the rotten scholars. Jiang Pingji sneered and asked them to get out of her territory. If they were thick-skinned and refused to leave, that was fine. When the house was built, they would never rent it to this family. During the farming season, the district headquarters didn't lend them oxen and farming tools. They made their whole family starve. They were so willful. If they weren't convinced, they could fight. Therefore, the rotten scholars who were prepared to scold her shut up. The construction of the entire Xiangyang district was on the right track. Changed every day. The people felt that the air was fresh, the roads were wide and tidy, and the houses were as beautiful as if they were carved out of a mold. They didn't have the right to live in the luxurious area around the district headquarters, but they could use the newly registered residents to apply to rent a new house. Every family longed for it. Even the local people who owned houses were envious. They had no choice but to be envious. The newly built houses made their old houses look even worse than the mud. In front of the houses were neat and clean green bricks. In front of their houses were mud puddles. When it rained, the difference was even greater. Although their houses weren't destroyed in the earthquake, they were dilapidated. How could they look better than the new houses? The inside and outside of the new house were neatly paved with green bricks. In such a thriving environment, there were only 2 places that were so busy that they wanted to vomit blood. One was the registration department where Qiguan Rang worked. The other was Handsome Li, who was in charge of reclaiming the wasteland. After a month, his originally wheat-colored skin had become 2 shades darker, and he looked even more resolute. He had lost some of the elegance of a pretty boy, but more of a mature man's steadiness and spirit. Of course, he also gave off the feeling of an uncle farmer. Jiang Pingji thought he would quit after a few days. She didn't expect him to be so engrossed in farming that he couldn't extricate himself. Not only that, Liyun also showed great interest in Jiang Pingji's improved farming tools. He had the urge to change his profession and become a farmer instead of fighting wars. The well-behaved child even forgot when he had started calling Jiang Pingji Lord. Anyway, Jiang Pingji had inexplicably become his lord. Carrying a hoe, he entered the city barefooted. Liyun was about to ask for a cup of tea in a tea house when something floated in front of his eyes. Coach Meng. Liyun smiled, revealing a set of shining white teeth that could even reflect light under the sun. What is this? Meng Hun said, the house, the Lord gave it to you. That day when there was a meeting to reward the house, Liyun was still outside the city with a group of youngsters to reclaim the wasteland and research on fertilizer. Liyun was stunned. He asked dumbly, house. Meng Hun was strangely silent. He also had an honest personality, but he wasn't as naive as Liyun. He saw how his lord bullied Liyun. Chapter 432. Li Yun's eyes widened in shock. He almost couldn't take it all in. It's so beautiful. This is much more beautiful than the thatched hut I used to live in. It's quite tall too. I don't have to worry about hitting my head. He stood on his tiptoes, stretched out his long arms and patted the door frame. There was a simple and honest smile on his face, and his black eyes were shining brightly. That pure smile and gaze, no matter who saw it, could not help but smile for him. Meng Hun was secretly speechless. He felt that his Lang Jun was tireless in teaching. He had dragged such a naive young man onto the pirate ship just because of a disagreement. Meng Hun crossed his arms and looked up at the door beam. Hit my head. Li Yun said with some lingering fear. Yes, it seems that I'm too tall. If I'm not careful, I'll hit my head. He was the type that looked skinny when dressed but muscular when undressed. His height was even more outstanding. The house was slightly shorter, so he had to lower his head and bend over to enter. Otherwise, his head would turn red from the impact. In the past, such tragedies often happened. Every time he hit his head, not only would his head hurt for half a day, but the entire thatched hut would also shake. Meng Hun laughed involuntarily. Perhaps the Lord was concerned about your height and specially built a tall house. Meng Hun hadn't realized it. The house allocated to Li Yun was indeed much taller than other houses. Meng Hun regained his senses. He couldn't help but admire his lord's attentiveness. At the same time, he felt his heart warm. Even he thought so, not to mention Li Yun, who had a sincere heart. His impression of Jiang Pingji increased exponentially. My lord is such a good person. I never thought that one day I would be able to live in such a house. I always felt that only high officials and nobles could live in such a house. Li Yun sincerely sighed, but his words changed after that. Now that I have a house, I'll work hard to attain scholarly honors. Perhaps a girl will fall for me. Li Yun's appearance was more mature. When he didn't speak, he could fool many people. They would think that he was cold and unapproachable. In reality, his temperament was rather simple. It was as if he had been brought to live in seclusion in the mountains for many years. Meng Hun didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Han Mei is handsome and good-looking. He's also skilled in martial arts. He's well-versed in military books. He's considered brave and astute. He'll definitely be extraordinary in the future. With such conditions, which girl wouldn't blush when they saw him on the street? Why does it sound like it's difficult for you to find a wife? Li Yun replied honestly. Master said that I'm too tall and girls don't like me. It wasn't his fault that he was tall. When he was 13 or 14, he grew so fast that he didn't even dare to eat. Meng Hun was speechless. Although Li Yun was indeed a little tall, it was more manly to be more imposing and sturdy. So what if he was tall? Meng Hun saw that his expression didn't seem to be fake, so he wanted to tease him a little. He circled around Li Yun and clicked his tongue, commenting, What Han Mei said is not wrong, he is indeed too tall. One must know that most of the beautiful girls nowadays were petite and dainty. If you choose a soft and weak wife and you hug her with both hands and want to kiss her from afar, you look like a father and daughter. Li Yun's cheeks flushed red and he felt very uncomfortable. Fortunately, he had become tanner recently, so the blush on his face was not very obvious. No, Han. Don't tell me that you're still a virgin? Meng Hun saw his reaction and found it very interesting. In this day and age, to find a man over 20 who was still a virgin was more difficult than plucking the stars from the sky. Meng Hun looked at Li Yun as if he was looking at a prehistoric creature. Li Yun's words made him feel embarrassed. Master said that this is called keeping one's body clean. Meng Hun couldn't help but ask, Are you sure it's not because there are no women in the deep mountains and forests? He finally understood why his lord liked to bully Li Yun. He was indeed easy to bully. Meng Hun brought Li Yun to understand the layout of the entire house. Unlike the 3-sectioned house that needed to be renovated further, the 2-sectioned house was simpler and had everything that needed to be had. Jiang Pingji had fully considered the problems of these single dogs. She had already ordered people to build some doors and windows during the construction. If the quality of life was not high, they could just move in and stay in the 2-sectioned house. Meng Hun's wife and daughter had passed away many years ago and he had no intention of remarrying, so he did not have many requirements for the place to live. As for Li Yun, if you feel that the house is simple and crude, let the Lord know. She can borrow some craftsmen to renovate the house. Li Yun shook his head and said, This is already good enough, I don't want anything else. The area of the 2-sectioned house was not big, but considering the military's habit of training in the morning, the house specially left an empty space for training. Every morning Li Yun could practice his spear there. After he was done, he could open the side door and go to the neighboring street to buy some breakfast to appease his hunger before going to work. I wish to apply for leave to take care of master in retirement. To take care of his master in retirement, this was Li Yun's wish. Meng Hun agreed. This is a filial act, the Lord will definitely approve my leave. The next day, Li Yun successfully applied for 3 days of leave from Jiang Pingji. 3 days of leave. Qiguan Rang used his red rabbit-like eyes to look at Li Yun with hidden bitterness. They were obviously equally busy, so why could he apply for 3 days of leave? Looking at the optimistic Li Yun leaving Xiangyang district with a small bag of food, Jiang Pingji laughed and patted his shoulder. Capable people do more work. Wenjing's work is of utmost importance. If you haven't completed the household registration after the houses in the district have been settled, the people won't be able to apply to rent a new house. Qiguan Rang snorted twice, appearing unwilling. Why doesn't the Lord transfer a few more people to Rang? It's not that I'm unwilling, but in the entire Xiangyang district, which literate person dares to show up in front of you? Jiang Pingji ridiculed him, making Qiguan Rang extremely annoyed. On the other side, Li Yun wore a coarse cloth robe, carrying a small bag and a silver-white spear on his back, walking under the scorching sun. The leave was only 3 days. He had to return before the deadline, so as to not let down the Lord's kindness to him. After walking for more than 4 hours, Li Yun's sharp ears heard the sound of rolling wheels. Lifting his head to look ahead, there was indeed a small dot on the horizon that was slowly getting closer. Little brother, do you know how far it is to reach Xiangyang district? Li Yun wanted to avoid it, but someone called out to him. He replied, if we walk it'll take about 4 hours. The person had a sword hanging from his waist. Li Yun could feel the faint smell of blood on him. It wasn't just this guard, the dozens of people surrounding the horse carriage all had the same smell, but the intensity was different. From the looks of it, the person sitting in the carriage should be an important person. Li Yun silently pursed his lips, appearing very aloof and unapproachable. Thank you, little brother. The guard smiled kindly at him, but his gaze drifted over the spear on Li Yun's back, his eyes flashing. Master, there's still 4 hours of journey. Let's go. Chapter 433. That voice left a deep impression on Li Yun, but he was concerned about his master and did not think too much about it. Li Yun and his master had lived in seclusion in the deep mountains for many years. The place was remote and the terrain was steep, but he felt it was familiar. Even with his eyes closed, he could come and go as he pleased. Seeing the familiar pool, Li Yun's smile brightened. Master, your disciple is back. Li Yun pushed open the straw hut, his smile frozen on his face. There was no one in the hut. Dust had accumulated on the table and stove. Master. Li Yun pursed his lips. Ever since he could remember, his master had never left this mountain. But looking at the thickness of the dust, this hut had been unoccupied for a long time. Where did his master go? After thinking for a while, Li Yun pulled open the tattered curtains in the inner room and bent over to enter. He felt around under his master's mattress. There was a small pit under the mattress. His master always hid things in it. He searched with the mentality of giving it a try. His fingertips touched something hard. He took it out and saw that it was a scroll. Just like the impression his master gave others, his body was like a spear, strong as a blade. His handwriting was the same. Idiot, seeing his handwriting is like meeting you. You are grown up, you can take care of yourself. I am relieved. When you see this letter, I have already left to seek revenge. If I am alive, I will return. If I am unlucky and die at the hands of my enemy, you must not seek revenge. Xianxia left behind a letter. Li Yun's eyes widened in disbelief. He read the letter over and over again. In the end, he helplessly believed that his master had really gone to seek revenge. But he had followed his master for so many years, but he had never heard of his master having any enemies. Would it be dangerous to seek revenge? Would the enemy be very strong? Li Yun's mind was in a mess, as if he had lost his mind. After a while, he got up and used a wooden basin to fetch water from the pool. He tidied up the hut. After a night, he found a brush and added his whereabouts on the bamboo scroll before putting it back in its original place. If his master returned safe and sound, he would definitely follow the clues and find him. Carefully closing the door of the straw hut, Liyun left with a lonely face. Just as Liyun entered the mountains to seek his master, Xiangyang district welcomed an unexpected guest. Stepping on the afterglow of the setting sun, a team of more than 50 people approached the West City Gate. Nowadays, Xiangyang district is heavily guarded. Entering and exiting the city requires strict checks. Just as the guard was about to step forward and question him, a wooden token flew towards him. The guard caught it with a confused look on his face. Find someone sensible. The person in the carriage is not someone you can casually inspect. The soldier was instantly enraged. Who is it? Who dared to put on airs in Xiangyang district? Just as he was about to lose his temper, the soldier beside him pulled him back and gave him a look, asking him to look at the clan emblem on the carriage. Clan emblem? The soldier looked down at the wooden sign and then at the low-key and simple carriage behind the crowd. Both of them had patterns in the shape of willow leaves. It looked like a few willow leaves, but in fact it was the word Lu. But why does this pattern look so familiar? What are you waiting for? Isn't that the emblem of Magistrate Lu? His companion reminded him in a low voice. The soldier was so frightened that he almost dropped the wooden token. He walked forward with trepidation and asked in a low voice, "Is the noble person in the carriage a relative of Magistrate Lu?" The higher-ups didn't instruct anyone from the Lu family to come over recently. The guard felt wronged and was afraid of losing his job. The person smiled and said, "The noble person in the carriage is indeed a relative of Magistrate Lu. Go and report quickly to prevent any delays." The soldier was completely stunned and hurriedly handed the wooden token back. "Please wait for a moment, noble person. I'll go and report now." Even so, the soldier was still cautious and did not report directly to the magistrate. Instead, he looked for Feng Jin nearby. "Did you say that the lord's relative is here?" Feng Jin frowned. The lord's relatives were mostly in Hejian. Lushi was also far away in Chongzhou. How could he come to Xiangyang district? No matter what, he had to go and take a look personally. Then he would know whether it was true or not. Lead the way. With that, Feng Jin walked towards the city gate. Once he saw the carriage, he was already 80% convinced. At this moment, the curtain of the carriage was lifted from the inside, revealing half a familiar face. Feng Jin almost lost his composure. Why did Lu Shi come to Xiangyang district from the borderlands of Chongzhou? Huayu, don't make a fuss. Lu Shi's hoarse voice contained a strong sense of fatigue. Let's enter the city. Because Liyun was on leave, there was no one to manage the farm matters. Jiang Pingji decided to do it herself. She wore a pair of straw sandals on her feet and a pair of wooden clogs in her hands. Leisurely, she sauntered back to the city. Her trousers were rolled up above her knees. Her originally fair and slender legs were covered in mud. Her long hair was casually tied up with a hemp rope. On the way back, she rubbed her slightly hungry stomach and took out a few coins to buy 2 steamed buns. She held one in each hand and the other in her mouth. If there was no reminder, no one would have guessed that she was the magistrate of Xiangyang district. As a result, Lu Shi saw his daughter's sloppy behavior. Seeing Lu Shi, Jiang Pingji was so shocked that she forgot to bite the steamed bun. The audience in the streaming room and their fellow streamers were stunned. Feng Jin and the others sat quietly in the hall. The seat that originally belonged to her was occupied by a charming middle-aged man. Age did not make Lu Shi look old. The white hair on his temples only made him look more mature. Time favored this man and made him look more charming than before. However, this was not the main point. The main point was, why was Lu Shi here? Without an imperial edict, the magistrate of a district could not leave his territory. Jiang Pingji held the steamed bun in her mouth and called out vaguely, "Father." Lu Shi looked at Jiang Pingji, who was dressed like a boorish youth. His already uncomfortable head felt even more uncomfortable. He felt that he had raised a fake daughter. "Father, why are you in Xiangyang district? The world is so chaotic now." Jiang Pingji swallowed the steamed bun in 2 or 3 bites. Just as she was about to step into the hall, she looked at the clean floor and then at her muddy legs. She quietly shrank back. "I'll clean up now. Father, please wait. Why you take care of them first." Jiang Pingji washed off the mud on her legs, put down her trousers, put on her wooden clogs and walked steadily to meet Lu Shi. Her disguise would undoubtedly cause the audience to ridicule her. "Jintian Wuging O, trash streamer, your father has seen your most boorish side. What's the use of pretending to be steady now?" The expressions of the streamer's father and the streamer were too funny. It felt like a father suddenly inspecting his son and happened to catch him watching a certain type of film. You guessed true or fake. My heart aches for the streamer's father. He must suspect that he raised a fake daughter. Jiang Pingji ignored the disturbing bullet screen in the streaming room and bowed respectfully to Lu Shi. Lu Shi sized her up from head to toe. Chapter 434. Jiang Pingji could not help but feel sad. A father was indeed the best. He knew how to love his daughter. She had told Qiguan Rang that she had not slept for a long time, but he looked at her with a "don't lie" expression. I am unfilial. I made you come all the way from Chongzhou. The world is not stable. The journey is dangerous. If you miss me, you can just send a letter. Why take such a big risk and come here personally? If something happens on the way, I will feel guilty for the rest of my life. Jiang Pingji said with concern. The journey was so dangerous, but Lu Shi dared to run around. Lu Shi laughed and said, I can't feel at ease without seeing you with my own eyes. The earthquake happened too suddenly. Even though Lu Shi was far away in Chongzhou, he felt the tremors. He could not imagine what happened to his daughter, who was at the center of the earthquake. Now that I have seen you, I can sleep well tonight, Lu Shi said gently. Luo Yue secretly glanced at Lu Shi. He was a man as gentle as jade. He had an indescribably noble demeanor. He then looked at Jiang Pingji. His mind was filled with all kinds of cruel behaviors. She was either killing or preparing to kill. These two people with such different styles were actually father and son? Jiang Pingji said softly, I feel guilty. I have made you worry. Lu Shi raised his hand and rubbed his daughter's head to comfort her. He especially liked this action. Bu Zhongqing, you are not allowed to touch His Majesty's noble head. What if you become stupid? The girl's mischievous laughter seemed to have happened yesterday. It became the most vivid memory in his mind. Zhongqing, don't be too fierce. Be gentle to her. My Majesty is actually a sharp-tongued but soft-hearted person. He's the best person in the world. Zhongqing, you have to promise me that you won't mistreat her in the future. Treat her well and love her well. This is for her own good. I want you and her to live well. Even if I'm not around, both of you should live well. Let me see a different history, okay? When no one was around, Lu Shi would ponder over Gu Min's words before she died. Had she returned to her own world? Was she living a more carefree and unrestrained life than before? Lu Shi closed his eyes to hide his thoughts. The longing was like a net binding him, making the hatred brewing in his heart thicker. Lu Shi only wanted peace of mind. Seeing that Jiang Pingji was safe and sound, he planned to rest for 2 days before returning to Chongzhou. Feng Jin and the others tactfully took over Jiang Pingji's tasks and gave her free time to chat with her father, fulfilling her filial piety. It was also at this time that Li Yun returned early. There was no one else by his side. Meng Han asked him, Han Mei, your master didn't come over? Li Yun said dejectedly, Master left a letter saying that he went to seek revenge on his enemy. It's just that I've followed my master for so many years, but I've never heard him mention any enemies. Now that he suddenly says he's going to take revenge, it really makes me anxious. However, Master is highly skilled in martial arts, so there won't be any problems when he travels outside. Meng Han secretly curled his lips. He had reservations about these words. To be able to raise such a pure and untainted child like Li Yun, that master was probably not that complicated. Nowadays the world is so chaotic. If you don't be careful when you go out, you won't even have your underwear left when you go home. Li Yun went to the district headquarters to look for Jiang Pingji to cancel his leave and return to work early. As soon as he entered, he saw his lord eating with a middle-aged man. My lord, I've returned from my leave. Lu Shi raised his head. His eyes gradually widened as he cried out involuntarily, Xiaohe? Jiang Pingji and Li Yun both revealed a baffled expression. The latter even turned his head to look behind him. There was no one. Was he calling for him? After Lu Shi blurted out, he immediately realized that he had misunderstood. The person in front of him was too young and his build was too tall. He didn't match the person in his memory. He gestured for Li Yun to come closer. With a complicated expression, he asked, What's your name? Li Yun glanced at Jiang Pingji, his eyes seeking her opinion. Jiang Pingji replied, Han Mei, this is my father. You can call him Old Master. Lu Shi's expression became somewhat conflicted. Han Mei, is that your courtesy name? This courtesy name really matched this person's face. It indeed seemed like a name that person would choose. One look and you could tell that it wasn't proper. In response to Old Master's question, "My name is Li Yun. If you don't mind, you can also call me Han Mei." "Your surname is Li, not Xia?" Lu Shi raised his eyebrows and asked, "Then do you have a man with the surname Xia?" "My master's surname is Xia." Li Yun didn't know what was going on, so he answered honestly. "Old Master, do you know my master?" "You call him master." Lu Shi was amused. His smile was sarcastic. "Where is he hiding now?" Li Yun was confused. If he didn't call his master, master, then what should he call him? Not only that, but the old master in front of him seemed to know his master. His words sounded familiar. "My master went out to travel a few days ago. He said he was looking for an enemy to take revenge and told me not to worry about him. If he's still alive, he'll definitely come back to look for me. If he's unfortunately dead, there's no need to take revenge for him." After saying this, Li Yun looked at Li Yun, who was a little dispirited, like a little rooster who had lost a battle. Lu Shi snorted. He said harshly, "He's going to seek revenge? Okay, then you don't have to wait. This person probably won't even have his bones left." Li Yun was furious. Even if the person in front of him was his lord's father and an old friend who knew his master, he was still angry. "Do you know who your master is going to seek revenge on?" Lu Shi was not afraid of the anger in Li Yun's eyes. The corners of his mouth curled into a mocking smile. He said to himself, "Barging into the Zhongzhou palace means death no matter what. No matter how capable Xianxia is, no matter how good his spear techniques are, he's still courting death." His words not only shocked Li Yun, but Jiang Pingji's eyes widened. She stared at Li Yun's face. Li Yun clenched his teeth. "My master's enemy is hiding in the Zhongzhou palace?" Something like that. Lu Shi took a sip of tea and looked at Li Yun with a complicated expression. "I think your master doesn't want you to know the truth. If that's the case, I won't be the bad guy. Young man, work hard with Lanting. Your future is bright." Lu Shi secretly smacked his lips. As one of the 10 great generals of the Jiang dynasty, how could his future not be bright? However, he never thought that Li Yun was the son of Xiaqian and that woman. It was a sin that could not be settled. Li Yun's mind was a mess. After hesitating for a while, he asked Lu Shi, "Are you familiar with my master?" Lu Shi sighed. "Xiaxiaohe and my late wife were childhood friends. We can be considered familiar. The people who were once alive and well were now scattered like the wind and clouds. It was a sad sight. By the way, how old are you this year? Are you married?" Lu Shi asked. Chapter 435. Lu Shi murmured, 20? That doesn't seem right. He didn't doubt that Li Yun was Xiaqian's son. Apart from his mother's facial features, Li Yun looked exactly like Xiaqian when he was young. Otherwise, he wouldn't have mistaken him for Xiaqian. Thinking of Li Yun's surname, he felt that his age was most likely fake. Xiaqian had purposely said he was 2 years older. Li Yun left with a stomach full of questions. Jiang Pingji, who hadn't spoken for a long time, asked Lu Shi, "Is there something wrong with Han Mei's background?" "Xiaqian's son. That face is the best proof." Lu Shi took a deep breath and said, "More than 10 years ago, this name was synonymous with young and romantic. He was the dream lover of many noble ladies. I didn't expect him to hide in Fingyi County with his son for so many years. He didn't even send a message home. I think he must have suffered all these years. Now that Li Yun is under your command, I can only say that fate makes fools of people." Jiang Pingji frowned and said, "Father, are you referring to Xiaqian? If that was the case, wouldn't Li Yun be that woman's son? Who else could it be?" Lu Shi sneered. "Then when Xiaqian went to the Zhongzhou palace to seek revenge, wouldn't he be killing his wife?" Lu Shi said disdainfully, "What kind of wife is she? She's just a demon who took over Xiaqian's wife's body." To Xiaqian, his beloved wife Wang Huiyun, who was known as the twin beauties of Langia, had died in childbirth long ago. The one who survived was nothing more than a venomous scorpion woman who was born to be arrogant, ruthless, and arrogant. What did that feel like? Wang Huiyun used to be the goddess of many young men. But not many people knew that their goddess body had been taken over by a ghost of unknown origin. She turned from pure and kind to wicked and wicked. Lu Shi sympathized with Xiaqian. If Wang Huiyun had died in childbirth, it would have been the end of it. But her body had been taken over by someone, and that person had used her body to pester all kinds of men. Not to mention seeing it with his own eyes, even thinking about it was disgusting. Jiang Pingji frowned. It was rare for Lu Shi to mention the past. She asked, "You took over Xiaqian's wife's body?" "Yes." Lu Shi nodded. Xiaqian and Wang Huiyun were childhood sweethearts. Many people's hearts were broken when they got married. A year later she gave birth to a son. I believe that child was Liyun. However, ever since Wang Huiyun gave birth, Xiaqian's behavior had become strange. He's anxious and cold to his wife. He goes to Buddhist temples and Taoist temples all day long, but in front of others he pretends that nothing has happened. Jiang Pingji's father's words. He was to be. The information contained in the words of the host's father was a little too much. And then, Jiang Pingji asked, Lu. She said, "She's speaking of this," Lu Shi sneered. His eyes, which used to be as gentle as water, were now as cold as a lake, which made people shiver. However, things are unpredictable. On their way to Hejin County they ran into bandits. Xiaqian risked his life to protect his wife. Unfortunately, he and his son were killed. But Xiaqian and Hanmei are still alive. So Wang Huiyun is lying. Lu Shi's face was gloomy. What bandits? Wasn't she the one who arranged them? She did it to get rid of Xiaqian. Xiaqian noticed something was wrong with her and wanted Master Liaochen to get rid of her. How could she not be afraid of a ghost of unknown origin? The atmosphere in the streaming room grew tense as Lu Shi's narration went on. All channel recommendation. Wybulai. Am I the only one who has goosebumps? Lao Siji Lianming. I thought about it. Xiaqian's wife was transmigrated when she was giving birth. Xiaqian found out and the transmigrator killed Xiaqian and his father. Of course, Liyun and his master are still alive. The transmigrator is suspected to have killed the host's mother. She has a deep grudge against the host's father. That's awesome, my transmigrator. Aha, you have a wild imagination, but it's very interesting. What's going on? Inueja Zhugachinmo. #propping chin. I think that's the right way to transmigrate. The ancients weren't idiots. Wouldn't they be suspicious if their loved ones changed? Xiaqian felt that there was nothing wrong with finding an expert to get rid of a ghost that had taken over his wife's body. But the transmigrator was also quite something. She made a beautiful comeback and was ruthless. I don't know if she'll threaten the host. Siskan Zaya, are you kidding me? Who can kill our host? The weeds on the grave of the last person who said this are now as tall as a person. But then again, the host really needs to be careful. This transmigrator is obviously not easy to deal with. I always feel that this transmigrator has a sense of superiority. Maybe she's read too many brainless transmigration novels? Yu Heshibi. This is a world that has definitely been penetrated into a sieve. Listen to my analysis. The transmigrator is a harem beauty. The host's mother is a sweet farmer. And the host is a despicable fighter. Looking at it this way, the host seems like a traitor. As a transmigrator, she doesn't look for someone to fall in love with, but instead snatches a job for men. You're awesome. Jiaging Wanfuzo. You guys don't understand. The host skill is the real deal. When you become an emperor, you can sleep with all the men in the world. That's the integrity a transmigrator should have. If you want to have sex, you should have sex. What's the use of fighting over a man with a few women? Who knows how many cucumbers have been used? If you have the ability to make all the men in the world fight for you, all the men will fight for you, and all the men will fight for you just to look at you. What are 3,000 handsome men to you? When he said that, he suddenly felt that the usually frivolous host's figure had suddenly grown a few notches taller. What does she want by doing this? Jiang Pingji didn't understand. Oh, who knows? Lu Shi was disdainful. But she's very ambitious. Be careful, Lanting. Jiang Pingji nodded. Even if Lu Shi didn't say anything, she was always on guard. After ending the unpleasant topic, Lu Shi suddenly thought of something. Oh right. Lu Shi said, there was a child marriage. Jiang Pingji was stunned. What? Isn't your mother and Xiaqian childhood friends? They used to joke that the two families would become in-laws. Lu Shi looked at Jiang Pingji helplessly. Lanting, you're already 16 this year. Don't you think about that? I think Li Yun is a little simple-minded. But Xiaqian's son can't be too bad. He's also quite good-looking. If you like him, you can take him. Chapter 436. The next day, Lu Shi and Jiang Pingji changed into ordinary people's clothes and walked around Xiangyang district. Looking at the thriving district, Lu Shi sighed in his heart. His Majesty's methods were indeed extraordinary. Father, are you tired? Do you want to rest in a tea house? Jiang Pingji brought Lu Shi to see Xiangyang district. Although Xiangyang district was not very prosperous at the moment, according to her plan, it would be reborn in a few months' time. Even Shangjing City could not compare to it. Jiang Pingji took the opportunity to talk with Lu Shi about governance. Her father had a deep understanding of governance. He was almost omniscient. He could point out many of her doubts. Jiang Pingji used to be the commander of the army, but the commander and the district magistrate were two different concepts. In terms of governance, even if Jiang Pingji had knowledge that surpassed the times, she still had to learn a lot. Good. When I retire one day, I'll come to your place and buy a house so that I can retire in peace. Jiang Pingji said, if you want to buy a house, you don't have to pay for it yourself. I have lots of land deeds. She could buy as many as she wanted for a penny. The first batch of houses were given to her subordinates, and the remaining 50 or so were hers. The second and third batches were ready to start construction. Jiang Pingji did not lack land deeds and house deeds. Lu Shi was speechless. Fortunately, the world is in chaos. Otherwise, you will be impeached. He did not need to think to know what his daughter had done. The land deeds she mentioned were not from a legitimate source. She was the district magistrate, and she had the final say in all the internal affairs of the district headquarters. 09 Xiao Shonet. If she wanted to buy back the land deeds with a penny, who could say no? Lu Shi stepped on the flat bricks and his wooden clogs made a rhythmic clacking sound. It was crisp and pleasant to the ears. I notice that the people here are well-mannered, Lu Shi said. There is no filth on either side of the street. You will be fined for littering, and the fine will be double the previous one. There are trash cans on either side of the road, and you can throw it away if you walk a few steps. If you don't lack money, you can throw it away. As long as you have enough property to compensate the district headquarters, I don't mind. Even if Jiang Pingji didn't issue such a decree, the phenomenon of people randomly throwing rubbish or spitting had decreased. The entire road was paved with green bricks. When had they ever seen such a smooth and clean road in their lives? If there was an eyesore, how uncomfortable it would be to look at it. Most of the places in Xiangyang district were under construction. A few areas had been cleaned up. Under Jiang Pingji's encouragement, many people opened street stalls, which brought some prosperity to the county town. There was no good tea in the tea house, so she ordered 2 big bowls of tea. The color was a little muddy, but the smell was not bad. Although it's your first time governing, you're doing much better than me. This was probably the talent that Amin was talking about. Lu Shi shook his head secretly. When he was in charge of Hu County in the past few years, he had worn himself thin and weak. Hu County barely had a flourishing scene. It had only been a month since Xiangyang district had emerged from the dark clouds of the earthquake. The people who came and went had smiles on their faces. He was deeply moved when he saw it. He did not know if it was because he was too weak or because His Majesty was too powerful. Jiang Pingji said, like father, like son. Lu Shi knew that the words were meant to make him happy, but he could not help but feel proud. He said, that's true. It's a family tradition. The father and son were narcissistic and praised each other in disguise. After drinking tea and putting down 2 coins, Jiang Pingji brought Lu Shi to the brick kiln. Father, I'll take you to see something. She ordered people to encircle the area of the brick kiln. Entry and exit had to be strictly checked. According to Jiang Pingji's plan, green bricks would become the specialty of Xiangyang district in the future, so technical protection was very important. They entered the brick kiln with their personal seal. The closer they got, the hotter the surrounding temperature became. It was a hot summer day. Soon Lu Shi's forehead was sweating. What are you looking at? Lu Shi was curious. Knowing that Jiang Pingji had arrived, the craftsman of the brick kiln quickly came out to welcome her. She waved her hand to indicate that there was no need for formalities. How are the things I asked you to make a while ago? Jiang Pingji asked the craftsman of the brick kiln as she walked. I've made 6 batches. Most of the semi-finished products are not ideal. I've only managed to make 3 sets. The old man showed a pained expression. I've destroyed the defective products according to my lord's request. The leftovers will be guarded by someone specially to ensure that no secrets will be leaked. 3 sets? It's better than expected. Jiang Pingji thought about it and said, "Take one set out for the old master to see." "All right. Please wait a moment, my lord." Hearing this, the craftsman of the brick kiln heaved a long sigh of relief and wiped the sweat off his face. There were many benefits to helping the lord. Some time ago the lord was very generous and rewarded him with a land deed. According to the plan, it should be the second batch of houses to be completed. Now the whole family was eagerly waiting for the first batch of houses to be completed and the second batch to be built. Just based on the appearance of the first batch of houses, how many people were envious of their great luck? With many years of experience in making pottery, they had won the Lord's favor. Now the whole family was living a good life. The craftsman of the brick kiln carefully took out a long box and opened it carefully. The audience in the streaming room thought it was a rare treasure. They didn't expect to see a glass tea set lying inside. "I love you, 666. The streamer really made glass. Lao Siji Lianmeng, it's indeed glass. Although the purity isn't very high, it's very exquisite." According to the usual plot of novels, this thing was worth a lot of money. The key was that the cost was low. A set of glass could be sold for hundreds of thousands of strings of coins. I'm asking you if you're afraid of this profit. 1,000 strings of coins was equivalent to one tael of silver. What kind of concept was hundreds of thousands of strings of coins? Even robbing a bank wasn't that domineering. Little angel, propping my chin. I'm curious who the streamer wants to trick with this glass. Shanzishu, it must be someone with a lot of money. If it's not the tycoon of Dongqing, then it's the idiot of the north borderline. Naturally, people today had never seen glass, not to mention that the glass was indeed beautiful. It was exquisite and beautiful. This thing. How much does it cost? Lu Shi's eyes were filled with amazement. He was a little obsessed, but he quickly returned to normal. It's very low. Jiang Pingji didn't specify the exact amount. She just used her thumb to point at the brick kiln behind her. She smiled and said, "When the bricks are baked, they're also baked. Father, look at it. How much do you think it's worth?" Lu Shi pondered and said, "Priceless. You want to show me this thing to show your filial piety?" "Of course. But isn't Xiangyang district too poor? Now we don't even have enough food. I wonder if Father can help me." Jiang Pingji smiled and took out a round bowl that was a few times smaller than a woman's palm. She held it with 2 fingers and it looked very beautiful under the light. "I heard that in the north borderline the rich are very rich. They raise horses and cattle in herds. They spend a lot of money without frowning. In order to show their noble status, they like to collect rare treasures. Is this true?" Lu Shi understood her intention. It turned out that she wanted him to help her sell it. He asked, "That's true, but they won't be interested in ordinary objects. As for this, there's no doubt that it will definitely be sought after by the nobles of the north borderline. How does Lanting plan to price it?" "How about 150,000 strings of coins?" Lu Shi was so shocked that he almost dropped the glass cup. 150,000 strings of coins? Even robbing a bank wouldn't make such a huge profit. "Daughter, are you sure you didn't add an extra zero? If you can't exchange it with gold and silver, I don't mind using horses or cattle or sheep of equivalent value. Fur is fine too," Jiang Pingji said calmly. She didn't look like she was the one who had just opened her mouth like a whale. Chapter 437. Bow to the despotic tyrant. 150,000 strings of coins. Are you sure the streamer didn't say 10,000? Eli Qingda. Can anyone explain how much 150,000 strings of coins is? 10 fingers are not enough. So Tian Yen, not to mention 10 fingers, even if you count the hands and feet of your whole family, you still won't be able to calculate it. Xinshi Liugang. Let's put it this way. Different dynasties have different exchange rates between copper coins, silver coins, and gold. It fluctuates like foreign exchange. You won't understand even if I explain it in detail. To put it simply, 1 coin is equivalent to 1,000 coins. 1 coin is equivalent to $1 here, so 150,000 strings of coins. Can you guess how much money it is? Traveling to ancient times with a glass vase at home and becoming a billionaire in an instant. Are you afraid of such a huge profit? Selling a set of glass products for 150 million. Streamer, you're not just black-hearted, you're black-hearted from head to toe. Jiang Pingji looked at their comments and added helplessly. Host V, I'm not that black-hearted. Converting it to here, it's at most 70 to 80 million. Everyone, Dash and Motzi. This is the first time I know that it's not black-hearted to set a price of 7 or 8 yuan at 70 to 80 million. Slimming failure. Streamer, you're great. Wuxia steadied his heart to avoid being scared to death by his daughter. He looked at the glass tea set with a conflicted expression. After a while he said, if there's only one set in the world, it's not impossible to sell it for 150,000 strings of coins. Jiang Pingji raised her eyebrows and said, it's definitely impossible to sell one set. That's why the price is set too high. Small profits but quick turnover can benefit more nobles in the northern borderline. The price should be set at a level that they can accept, but they don't think it's cheap. Wuxia pondered for a while and his gaze turned to the glass tea set a few times. I think 5 to 20 strings of coins should be enough. We need to make a few more types of these things and the price can be increased or decreased according to the purity. If we want the sales to be good, we have to plan carefully and promote their origins. After hearing Jiang Pingji's whopping price of 150,000 strings of coins, the audience felt that the streamer's father was very kind. Xianggu is the cutest. Have my values been corrupted? Why do I feel that glassware is cheap? To me Dalao. To the one above, you are not alone. Don't Hushual Badeo. To the previous poster, there are more than 2 of you. Jiang Pingji frowned as she looked at the rows of complaints. Isn't this price too low? Wuxia said, that's a good price. If you want a good horse, you'll have to lower the price. The northern borderline was vast and rich in high-quality horses. They also kept a close eye on the various horse farms. However, there would always be people who would take risks for the sake of profit. The horse that Wuxia gave to Jiang Pingji was smuggled out. It was originally meant to be presented to the king of the northern borderline, but the officials under him intercepted it and sold it. The horse that they gave to the king was slightly inferior. How could Wuxia not know about this? Lanting, Amin often says that doing business is like fighting a war or ruling a country. There are many ways to do it. Once you master the rules, you can play with the entire market. Wuxia smiled. His wife was an expert in business. She was the one who had built up the businesses of the second branch of the Lu family. He had been with her for many years and had learned a little. Leave this matter to me. You just have to wait for the money to come in. Jiang Pingji naturally believed in Wuxia. Then I will control the number of kills and strive for excellence. Wuxia nodded and added, the rarer something is, the greater its value. No matter how good something is, once there are too many of them, it won't be considered good anymore. I will stay here for a few more days to make a few sets of good quality and bring them back. From then on, don't make this thing in the kiln for the time being. Keep a close eye on the people under you. If anyone secretly makes it or spreads the skill, kill them. Don't be soft-hearted. I know. I have people who know how to make it. I know who leaked the secret. Jiang Pingji had a gentle smile on her face. The craftsman of the kiln could not help but feel his scalp go numb when he heard it. The old man had experienced things like learning a skill, secretly opening a kiln to make it, and then smuggling and selling it for profit when he was young. After all, it was a business with no capital. Who would not do such a good thing? He was not afraid of not having profits, but he was afraid of not having the guts. When he heard the conversation between the father and son, even he could not help but tremble. That was a few strings of coins. Who would not be tempted? However, what she said next made him shrink his neck. No matter how much money he had to be alive to spend it. Do a good job. When we make a lot of money, we won't forget your contributions. Jiang Pingji raised her hand and patted the shoulders of the craftsman. If you do a good job, I will remove your grandchildren's status as craftsmen. In the future, when the county opens a school, give them a free place to study. The current household registration system was a pain in the ass. The children of craftsmen could only be registered as craftsmen. In terms of social status, although they were slightly higher than slaves, they were still lower than ordinary people. It was impossible for a craftsman to remove their status as craftsmen without some miraculous encounters. Not to mention that the Lord had promised to give their children the opportunity to study. In this era, it was not easy to study no matter how rich the family was. The source of books was a big problem. How could they study without textbooks? Jiang Pingji was born into an aristocratic family. Naturally, the craftsman did not doubt her. The craftsman's eyes lit up. He said in a loud voice, "Rest assured, my lord. I will not let you down. For the sake of the bright future of his descendants, for the sake of them becoming superior people, the craftsman of the brick kiln wished he could live here directly, keeping his eyes wide open to supervise everyone, managing every step well and personally destroying all the glass waste. That's good. Jiang Pingji asked the craftsman to take out the 3 sets of glass tea sets. The best set would be given to Lu Shi. One would be used by herself, and the other would be kept in the government office of the county. The next day Qiguan Rang came to work with sleepy eyes. When he opened the door, a strong golden light shone into the hall. The reflection made his eyes blur. What the hell was that? He squinted his eyes and found a set of exquisite, colorful objects on the table inside. All of a sudden all the sleepy bugs flew away. Qiguan Rang was so scared that he quickly retreated to the door. He looked around and murmured, "Could it be that I'm not awake yet?" Qiguan Rang did not believe it. He took small steps toward the table. The beautiful objects had not disappeared. He carefully reached out his hand and touched it. A cold sensation came from his fingertips. They did not turn into bubbles. It's not a dream. His breathing became heavier. He stared at them with a serious expression. What's wrong, Wenjing? After a while Feng Jin came in with a large pile of dusty bamboo slips. Qiguan Rang was already inside. Chapter 438. Wenjing. The bamboo slips that Feng Jin was carrying were piled high, blocking his view. When he didn't hear Qiguan Rang's response, he called again. Ah. Qiguan Rang then reacted and stood up to help Feng Jin carry some of the bamboo slips. When did you come, Huayu? I just came a while ago. I saw you sitting there in a daze. I thought you closed your eyes and fell asleep. Feng Jin carried the large pile of bamboo slips to the short table behind the screen in the government office. He sorted them according to the contents of the strips of cloth stuck on each bamboo slip. The work was a little tedious and needed to be careful. This small room was full of such bamboo slips, which recorded the case files of Xiangyang district in recent years. The content was vast and complicated. Although Xiangyang district was not big, there were many messy matters. In order to restore the work system of the entire district headquarters as soon as possible, Feng Jin began to work overtime again. He was just not as crazy as he was at the beginning. He desperately hoped that his lord would quickly start to recruit talents and get more people to help him share the workload. Today's government office was obviously more females than males. The girls from before had all become external staff. Fortunately, they had these well-educated and well-mannered maidens. Otherwise, the few of them would be exhausted to death. In order to make it convenient for these girls to work, his lord specially opened up another government office. It wouldn't be too awkward to meet them occasionally. Feng Jin tidied up for a while and realized that there was no movement outside. He was suspicious. Wenjing? What was wrong with Qiguan Rang today? If it was in the past, even if he didn't want to speak, there wouldn't be such an awkward silence. Feng Jin was puzzled. He took out the bamboo slips that he didn't finish yesterday and planned to finish them in one go today. What are you looking at? At this time Feng Jin realized that Qiguan Rang wasn't asleep sitting down. His mind was obviously taken away by something. Wenjing, what are you looking at? You're so fascinated. This thing. Feng Jin stopped nagging and his starry eyes widened. Suddenly his hands loosened and the bamboo slips in his arms fell to the ground. With a burst of crackling sounds, Feng Jin's toes were hit by the scattered bamboo slips, almost causing him to grimace in pain. How could Qiguan Rang be distracted when he heard the commotion? The two of them looked at each other, then tacitly shifted their gazes to the table. Feng Jin stopped tidying up the bamboo slips and hurriedly sat at the table. He secretly moved his toes. It hurt so much. He looked at the tea set on the table. What is this thing that emits colorful glaze light? Qiguan Rang was also puzzled. Does Huayu not recognize this thing? It can't be that serious, right? Feng Jin was born in the Feng family, which was one of the 4 noble families in Dongqing. His family had thousands of years of heritage. What did they not have in their family? Feng Jin had grown up in such a family. What had he not seen in this world? Qiguan Rang did not believe that Feng Jin had never seen this object before. In all honesty, Feng Jin had never seen this thing before. It looks like a tea set. Could it be a product of the northern borderline? Feng Jin picked up a small and delicate transparent bowl and carefully played with it. It was smooth and cold. It was summer and the weather was hot. There was no ice in the government office to cool down, so it was very hot. When Feng Jin touched the delicate teacup, his fingertips felt an indescribable coolness. It was cold and delicate, which made him love it so much that he couldn't put it down. The northern borderline. I don't think so. Qiguan Rang shook his head. His ancestral home was at the border, which was very close to the northern borderline. The customs of the two places were intertwined, and there were many commercial and trade contacts. If there was such a good thing, Qiguan Rang would have heard of it. I don't know who put this thing here. I saw it on the table when I came here. Even if Qiguan Rang did not have a hobby of collecting, he could see the value of the thing in front of him. It was definitely expensive. Feng Jin put the tea bowl back, but his eyes could not help but wander. He liked it the first time he saw it. Why don't we find someone to ask who came to the government office last night? Such a treasure can't just appear out of thin air. When Feng Jin was about to get up, he saw Su Ke rubbing his eyes. He looked like he did not have enough sleep, and there were still some green circles under his eyes. Wenjing Huai, you two are really early today. Su Ke called out. He keenly noticed that the two of them were behaving strangely. Then, his gaze was attracted by the set of incomparably dazzling glass tea set. What is this? The casting material is cold and hard and there are no gaps. I've never heard of this before. The three people surrounded the set of glass tea sets. If Jiang Pingji had not swayed into the government office with a meat bun in her mouth and a pot of red dates and white fungus soup in her hand, the three people did not know how long they would be slacking. He frowned and shouted. What are you doing? You don't deal with the government affairs early in the morning. Why are you gathering here for a meeting? The three people heard the movement and greeted one after another. When they looked up, they found that Jiang Pingji was carrying something in her hand. They recognized the red dates and white fungus soup, but they had never seen a lump of red dates and white fungus soup floating in the air. I saw that you have been tired recently, so I asked someone to make this red dates soup. The temperature is just right. Jiang Pingji turned over the three inverted long glass cups on the table and poured a cup for each of them. The red dates and white fungus soup was personally poured by the Lord. Even if it was poisonous, they had to drink it. Each of you has a cup. Wash it yourself after using it. If you don't mind mixing the cups, I won't say more. Jiang Pingji poured a cup for herself. She found these red dates from the warehouse of the district headquarters. The dates were big and the seeds were small. They tasted very sweet. After being boiled into a thick soup, the sweetness was diluted. She suddenly had a craving for it in the morning, so she asked the maid to help her boil it for more than 2 hours. Jiang Pingji waited for the red dates and white fungus soup to cool down a little before putting it into the big pot. What is this? Feng Jin looked at the cup in front of him and then at the big pot in Jiang Pingji's hand. Because some red dates and white fungus soup had been poured out, a part of the top was exposed. Feng Jin slightly widened his eyes as if he had seen a prehistoric monster. Needless to say, the material of the teapot and the teacups on the table came from the same source. His lord was definitely an insider and knew their origins. It's easy to clean a cup for drinking. The only drawback is that it's a little brittle and can't be dropped. Jiang Pingji's answer almost made Feng Jin and the other two choke. How could she want to drop such a precious glaze? Drink it. Don't worry, I didn't cook it. The maid of the district headquarters cooked it for me. Tastes good. The three of them were silent. It was not a matter of whether the red dates and white fungus soup tasted good at all. Su Ke picked up the cup. His fingertips could feel the warmth from the red dates and white fungus soup. But where did these things come from? In fact, he wanted to ask how much it was worth, whether it was expensive, and whether he could buy one with his little wealth. The surface of the cup was smooth and translucent, with a colorful glaze. One could not help but want to gently touch the surface of the cup. The delicate touch was hard to match even for a girl with the most delicate skin. Su Ke not only had a problem with voice, but he also had some fetishes. This could be seen from his reaction when he first touched the bamboo paper. Chapter 439. Among the people present, except for Feng Jin who could still maintain his demeanor, Qiguan Rang and Su Ke were shocked. Su Ke, who overreacted, was even more miserable. He almost choked the red dates and white fungus soup into his lungs. He clutched his chest and coughed uncomfortably. What? 30,000 strings of coins? Su Ke coughed for a while to calm down. His voice suddenly rose, his fingers pointing at the cup were trembling. Squandering. He was very clear about how much money his lord had. Where did he get the 30,000 strings of coins to buy such a flashy but impractical thing? As the housekeeper of the entire district headquarters, Suku almost fainted from anger, but he forgot that Jiang Pingji did not have that much money. Even if she used the entire Xiangyang district to pay off the debt, she would not be able to get that much money, let alone embezzling it. The so-called 30,000 strings of coins was just said to tease the three of them. She did not expect them to be so easily teased. Qiguan Rang and Feng Jin were the first to react. They looked at the smiling Jiang Pingji with a serious expression. My lord is not the kind of person who indulges in pleasure. Why would you spend 30,000 strings of coins to buy such a thing? Don't tease me. Even though Feng Jin was from the Feng family, he would not spend 30,000 strings of coins to buy a set of collectibles. It was not that he could not afford it, but he was more pragmatic. Hey, the three of you really can't take a tease. When Coach Meng and Coach Luo come later, don't expose me. With such a playful master, the three of them were also mentally and emotionally exhausted. These things were made last night when I was baking the green bricks in the kiln. The quality is uneven. Those aren't the best glass. I originally wanted to destroy them, but thinking of your hard work, I stole a set and left it in the government office. Jiang Pingji smiled, revealing her white teeth. She looked proud. How about it? Do you think it's worth 30,000 strings of coins? 30,000 strings of coins? Why didn't she just rob the money? Suka's face was full of resentment. He thought his lord was a little more mature, but he did not expect her to be so bad. Feng Jin straightened his mind and carefully looked at the object in his hands. After thinking for a while, he slowly opened his mouth. This thing is rare in the world. It can be said to be a work of art. The quality is even more unheard of. If I meet someone who knows how to do it, 30,000 strings of coins is definitely worth it. It's just that. I don't know how much money, manpower, and time are needed to make this thing. 30,000 strings of coins. Rich tycoons who chased after fame would indeed fork out their own money to buy it. They would even happily snatch it. But in today's world, who would spend so much money on a set of luxury goods to enjoy? Jiang Pingji drank the red dates and white fungus soup while listening to Feng Jin. He became more and more confident. I've already said that it's something I made when I was baking the green bricks. How much money, manpower, and time do you think it takes to make it? Jiang Pingji smiled and said, Huayu's judgment is absolutely accurate. After all, he's the second young master of an aristocratic family. If you say that it's worth 30,000 strings of coins, then I'm completely relieved. Why would they be afraid of sales if they operated properly? I'm afraid that the supply will not be able to meet the demand and people will come begging to buy it. Feng Jin and the rest were stunned on the spot. When they understood what Jiang Pingji meant, they were even more shocked. My lord, you mean to say, sell them for 30,000 strings of coins? Jiang Pingji said casually, no, these cups are for you to drink tea. When you drink tea from a ceramic bowl, there's always a muddy taste. Jiang Pingji not only wanted to bake glass products, but she also wanted to make porcelain that could only be found in the History Museum. However, she was still researching with her companions in the streaming room. It would take a while before she could start production. Seeing the three strategists' dumbfounded expressions, Jiang Pingji said shamelessly, Your lord, I sympathize with my subordinates. Why would I treat you unfairly and exploit you? The few batches of glass tea sets that are baked in the brick kiln are for sale. Even if your lord plays with mud, she's different from ordinary people. She can play with different tricks. It's not 30,000 strings of coins, it might be 3 million strings of coins or even more. She wanted to see who would dare to mock her for only playing with mud. If she didn't play with mud, where did the green bricks in Xiangyang district come from? Where did the glass in the brick kiln come from? Although Jiang Pingji didn't show a proud expression, her eyebrows were raised a little more than usual. Feng Jin and the rest were too shocked and didn't notice this detail, but the viewers in the streaming room were sharp-eyed. Jintian jigging. Look, the streamer is so proud of herself. Bazia, if you didn't remind me, I wouldn't have noticed this detail. Looking at it now, not only is the streamer's tail high up in the sky, it's practically bringing her to fly to the 9th layer of heaven. Mayan Zizao. The streamer's proud look is asking for a beating, but why do I find it so cute? Don't talk nonsense. Sigh, if that's the case, then I'll silently feel sorry for the fool who is about to be cheated. What is a fool? A fool with a lot of money. Come quickly. Jiang Pingji targeted the 3 tribes of the north borderline and set it as the first stop to cheat money. Although the north borderline always fantasizes about how powerful they are and can't wait to use the whites of their eyes to despise Dongqing, they secretly hold things from the hinterland of the Central Plains in high esteem. Not only do they fight to buy them, they even regard it as a fashion. Their mouths are very stubborn, but their bodies are very honest. The noble women and ladies of the north borderline are proud of collecting treasures from the Central Plains. Things that can only be sold for 1 or 2 strings of coins in the Central Plains can be sold for at least 10 times more at the 3 tribes of the north borderline. If it weren't for such profits and the dangerous journey, who would be willing to do business in the north borderline? Su Ku and the other 2 were shocked by Jiang Pingji's bold words. They even forgot how to speak. Feng Jin was the first to react. He said solemnly, "My lord, you have to protect the manufacturing method closely. Don't worry. Before we earn enough money, I'll send someone to keep an eye on the brick kiln." Lu Shi had reminded her about this matter, and Feng Jin mentioned it again. How could Jiang Pingji not take it seriously? She had already thought of a way to deal with it. The rarer something is, the greater its value. If there's too much of it, it'll be worthless. Whoever dares to cut off her source of wealth, she'll cut off her descendants. Suka's expression was dreamy. He only found his voice after a long while. "My lord, these things, how much exactly do they cost?" "They come with the bricks. It's just a few coins, right?" Jiang Pingji said uncertainly. Everyone was silent again. Things that cost a few coins. Selling them for 30,000 strings of coins. Doesn't your conscience hurt? Suka subconsciously raised his hand and touched his chest. They were the ones who earned money. Why should his conscience hurt? Not only did it not hurt, it was also alive and kicking. The 3 of them shouted in unison, "Great! Host V. When this batch of glass is sold, the Xiangyang district government will have the money to pay salaries." Jiang Pingji's words were like a fake bomb that exploded. The audience in the streaming room was so shocked that they couldn't react. Wait, what did the host say? Pay salaries? The audience in the streaming room was still immersed in Jiang Pingji's shamelessness. They didn't expect her to be so shameless. Chapter 440. Such a hardworking, crazy, overtime, free, tall, rich and handsome employee. Please give them a dozen. The audience in the streaming room was in an uproar again. Compared to the streamer, Zhou Bopi had no conscience at all. At least Zhou Bopi would pay people a salary. The streamer had never paid a penny. Streamer V, look at what you're saying. I gave you a house and I supply the food for the entire district. As soon as she finished speaking, a little angel immediately retorted angrily. "Tumi Dalao. Hee, a house of 3 pennies exchanged for food. Streamer, you're really great." Even though she was ridiculed, who was Jiang Pingji? She did not need to take such ridicule to heart. Jiang Pingji said very generously, "Before this batch of glass is sold, the brick kiln will not continue to produce glass. After all, the rarer something is, the greater its value. The quantity must be strictly controlled. But we will also start to study other things. Oh, you're all on the same side as the Lord. I can treat everyone badly, but I can't treat you badly. After we're done today, do you want to follow me to the brick kiln and each of you can choose a set?" Although the glass was expensive, she knew her family well. She was not a stingy person. She would share blessings. Lu Shi originally wanted to stay in Xiangyang district for 2 days, but because of the glass, it was delayed for 3 to 4 days. The brick kiln worked day and night, speeding up the firing. The defective products were ruthlessly eliminated and destroyed. The quality glass teaware was carefully packed and placed in a box piled with layers of brocade. Just as Jiang Pingji ridiculed, glass was too fragile. To prevent the treasure from being damaged and losing tens of thousands of strings of coins, the protection work had to be done well. Who could afford to pay for it if it was broken? Although the audience in the streaming room ridiculed her for being too shameless, one thing had to be admitted. No matter how many fakes they were originally made, their true value lay in the market price at the end of the sale. The glass teaware indeed had a market value of tens of thousands of strings of coins. In other words, their lord gave away something that was easily worth tens of thousands of strings of coins. The 3 of them were a little confused by this explosive news, and they subconsciously opened their mouths to thank him. Jiang Pingji responded with a hum and suddenly changed the topic. Speaking of which, is the red dates and white fungus soup that bad? The red dates and white fungus soup in front of them was almost untouched, the temperature was almost gone. Feng residence, inner court. He did not know if Chongqing was more like her father or her mother. At such a young age, one could already see her nature of being tormented. Yeah, she muttered a strange sound and used both her hands and feet. Under her unremitting efforts, her chubby body rolled once and finally turned over. Her two legs were flapping about as if she wanted to turn back to her lying position. Wei Jingxian sat next to her and gently helped her to turn over so that she could continue to roll around and play. However, he smiled and said, "The way Chongqing struggled just now was like a little tortoise that couldn't flip itself over." The maidservant at the side added with a smile, "Your servant heard from the old people that children need 4 to 5 months to be able to turn over and crawl around. Little girl's body is strong and healthy. It's only been 3 months, little girl can already turn over. With such precocious intelligence, perhaps in a few months, Furen will be able to hear the little girl call you Nyangqin." When Wei Jingxian heard this, the smile on her face became even more gentle. In terms of character, she did not know whether Chongqing took after her or Feng Jin. He was stubborn, lively and active. If Chongqing had to turn over and roll around to play, then she must rely on her own ability. Previously, Wei Jingxian saw that it was difficult for her to roll and she could not turn over for a long time. So, as a mother, she laughed and helped her. Unexpectedly, the child's face turned red and she wailed loudly. She looked like she did not want to give in. Wei Jingxian could only pick her up and coax her in every possible way. However, Chongqing, who bore a grudge, refused to stop. She was really afraid of this child. After that, no matter how Chongqing rolled around on the table, she did not help. After all, a baby's energy was limited. After rolling around and playing for half an afternoon, how could Chongqing bear it? Not long after, Chongqing was already in a state of drowsiness and fell into a deep sleep. When Feng Jin stepped into the afterglow of the setting sun and returned home, he saw Wei Jingxian kneeling beside Chongqing with a faint smile on her lips. His daughter was sprawled out in a deep sleep. He could totally imagine how her sleeping posture would be when she grew up a little bit, how painful it would be for his eyes. When Feng Jin saw that casual sleeping posture, he hardened his heart several times to ask the servant woman to correct the child. However, when he met his daughter's watery eyes, he immediately retreated in defeat. How could he bear to be forceful? "Huayu, why are you back so early today?" The servant girl heard the movement and saluted, which startled Wei Jingxian, who was in a daze. Feng Jin held a long black wooden box in his arms. He looked a little cautious. He answered, "Yes, there are not many things to do today. I handled them quickly, so I came back early." Wei Jingxian's eyes fell on the long black box curiously. She silently asked what was inside. "It's a gift from the Lord, but it's a little fragile. I can't let Chongqing touch it." It was not that Feng Jin was distressed about the glass tea set, but it was too easy to cut the skin after the glass was broken. In Feng Jin's heart, there was no treasure in the world more precious than his Chongqing. "It'll be bad if it gets cut. What is it exactly?" Wei Jingxian asked curiously. Feng Jin did not keep her in suspense. He gently put the box down, trying not to make a sound that would disturb Chongqing's sleep. "Look, isn't this craftsmanship amazing and peerless?" Feng Jin opened the box. It was filled with deliberately cut pieces of cloth of various colors. He took out a delicate teapot. It was the size of his palm. It was exquisite, elegant, and exquisite. It reflected the setting sun in the evening, revealing a charming, colorful light. Wei Jingxian was so mesmerized that she almost forgot to breathe. Where did you get this strange thing from?" Wei Jingxian covered her mouth with both hands to prevent the sound of her breathing from being too loud. "Lanting gave it to me. Not only did I get a share, but Wenjing and the others also sent one." Feng Jin rarely addressed Jiang Pingji as his lord in private. It was not disrespectful, but he was more inclined to treat her as a friend. Wei Jingxian repeated in disbelief, "Mr. Qiguan and the others also have a share?" She thought that it would be a miracle if there was even one such peerless treasure that excelled the workmanship of the heavens. Yes. Seeing his wife's reaction, Feng Jin suddenly wanted to tease her. "How much do you think it's sold for? It's such a precious and beautiful thing. The price is definitely not low. It's at least 7 or 8,000 strings of coins." Feng Jin smiled and said, Lanting wants to sell it to the nobles of the northern borderline for 30,000 strings of coins. Wei Jingxian's eyes widened in shock. She lost her voice and said, 30,000 strings of coins. Why don't you rob a bank? Chapter 441. A few days later, Lu Shi left with 20 sets of glass tea sets. Jiang Pingji saw him off outside the city. Lanting, you're 16 years old this year. Have you ever thought of revealing your true identity? Lu Shi looked at Jiang Pingji, who was riding on White's back, and said, I'm not asking you to restore your identity now. I just want you to reveal some information to those close to you in case they can't accept it. It's better to be prepared just in case. Jiang Pingji thought about it and said, this matter doesn't have to be rushed. Lu Shi did not understand. Jiang Pingji said, why you knows that I'm a girl? He's already accepted the most stubborn part. What's there for me to be afraid of? As for Xiaoyu and Wenjing, seriously, they're not blind. In a year or two, I think a simple disguise won't be able to hide my daughter's characteristics. Let them suspect it themselves. It's better for them to discover it themselves than for me to say it myself. Jiang Pingji was clear about her own body. She had already evaluated Lu Shi's body. She concluded that it would be too difficult to rely on binding to make her chest flat-chested in the future. She couldn't possibly say that she had developed chest muscles, could she? After thinking about it, she decided to restore her original identity when her power was slightly stronger and she conquered the whole of Fengyi County or even Wanzhou. Even if Lu Shi hadn't reminded her, Jiang Pingji had the intention to slowly reveal her intentions. Her chest was slowly beginning to develop. It was too uncomfortable to continue binding. In order to release her cleavage and to breathe smoothly, she had to speed up her pace and build her power. Lu Shi saw that she had her own plans and felt reassured. The father and daughter exchanged a few words, then he asked the horsekeeper to set off. Scope. Watching Lu Shi's carriage disappear from her sight, Jiang Pingji patted White. The beautiful little girl carried her back to the city. The horse's hooves stomped on the ground. It was as fast as lightning, stirring up a cloud of dust. While Xiangyang district was still under rapid construction, the outside world was already in a mess. Although the Xingyi army had been rejected twice by Jiang Pingji, they still had a great appeal among the uninformed people. In addition, the Dongqing court had adopted a laissez-faire measure against them. This also led to the two northern prefectures becoming a battlefield for the Xingyi army and the Red Lotus group. There was not much difference between the two peasant forces that rose up in revolt, but as time passed, the Red Lotus group gradually developed and strengthened, steadily suppressing the Xingyi army. The reason was that the members of the Xingyi army were bandits, while the Red Lotus group was a group of bandits with beliefs and needs. Was the Dongqing emperor willing to let these peasants act like tyrants in his territory? Of course he was unwilling, and he even wished for nothing more than to capture all these wicked people, behead them and exterminate their 9 generations. He had no choice but to allow the north to descend into chaos. 100,000 imperial guards escorting the entire royal family and the court officials to move the capital to Qinzhou was already very taxing. If the Xingyi army or the Red Lotus group were to harass and pursue them from behind, no one could guarantee the safety of the royal family and the important officials. More importantly, the Dongqing emperor would not allow his dignity as the emperor to be trampled on like this. Therefore, when two groups of peasants rose up in revolt in the north, the Dongqing emperor simply turned a blind eye to it and allowed them to fight among themselves, restrain each other and exhaust each other. It was a blessing in disguise for the team that moved the capital to Qinzhou. They traveled steadily and did not encounter too many disturbances along the way. Now that more than 3 months had passed, the huge and bloated team finally stepped into the border of Qinzhou. Calculating the time, they would reach the new capital in another 7 or 8 days. Everyone from top to bottom could not help but heave a sigh of relief. At that moment, the Dongqing emperor received news that almost made him vomit blood. Unfilial son. The Dongqing emperor was so angry that his hands trembled. He slapped Wuma Jun hard and his face tilted to one side. Wuma Jun was called over by the emperor. As soon as the father and son saw each other, he was slapped hard and he was stunned. Wuma Jun hated the emperor to the core. He could not wait for the old man to die immediately, but he still had to put on a sad expression. He knelt at the emperor's feet sincerely and said with tears streaming down his face, "Father, I don't know what I did to make you so angry, but I still beg you to calm down. Don't harm your body because of me. Father, father. He cried sincerely and sorrowfully, but his eyes were filled with childish admiration for his father. His acting skills burst forth, moving the audience. However, the Dongqing Emperor was full of anger now. How could he be fooled by Wu Majun's performance? The more Wu Majun acted like this, the more disgusted he felt. Therefore he did not suppress his anger at all. He simply slapped Wu Majun again so that both sides of his face were symmetrical. Bastard. When he spat out these two words, Wu Majun's face turned pale. His eyes revealed a strong hatred. Father, I have no problem with you slapping me, but you have to let me know what I did wrong, right? Wu Majun really hated the emperor in front of him, but he yearned for the emperor's unscrupulous supreme power. Look, if the man in front of him was not the emperor, how could he casually slap him, trample on his dignity and disregard his character? It was all because the man in front of him was the emperor. At that moment, his inner obsession with the emperor's power climbed to the peak. What did you do wrong? Ha, you bastard, what right do you have to ask me what did you do wrong? The Dongqing emperor was so angry that he wanted to laugh at his stupid son. He was handsome, but why was he so stupid? Did he really think that he was the only smart person in the world? Let me ask you, why was Prince Changshu able to take my transfer order and leave Xianxia with his troops to Qinzhou? This man has the ambition of a wolf. Are you blind that you didn't see it? Once he shed all pretense of cordiality, both you and I will die without a burial place. Without the emperor's decree, Prince Changshu would not have been able to pass through all the checkpoints without losing a single soldier. The sun in front of him really made him feel cold. Wu Majun's expression changed. He thought of something and asked in surprise, Uncle, you brought your troops out of your fief? The Dongqing emperor laughed coldly. Yes, 150,000 soldiers and horses were only 2 days' journey from here. If it weren't for the fact that I had a lot of trusted subordinates who kept an eye out and sent this matter to me as quickly as possible, would I have to wait until the day my head falls to the ground to find out what kind of good things you have done behind my back? Wu Majun's face turned pale. Father, I did not do this. The Dongqing emperor was furious. He lifted his foot and kicked Wu Majun's heart. Bastard, how dare you quibble? He had obviously used his strength to kick his son until he fainted. The Dongqing emperor took a breath and calmed down a little. He raised his hand and asked the medical officer to examine Wu Majun. Perhaps because he had been too angry recently, the wrinkles on the emperor's face became more obvious and made him look older. Don't be sad. I will give you children in the future, many, many children. The emperor sat on the side of the bed and looked at the pale-faced woman lying on the bed. Her originally beautiful face was now pale and weak, making one feel pity for her. He comforted her. You're a fool. Why didn't you discuss such an important matter with me? Huijun turned sideways. Her tears flowed silently. She looked very pitiful. Her eyes were misty with tears. She looked at herself and said, You and the fourth prince are father and son. I am just a stubborn person. No matter how deep my relationship with your majesty is, how can it be deeper than the relationship between your majesty and the fourth prince? Chapter 442. The emperor's gaze was so gentle that it could drown a person. Huijun seemed to be a little shy from his gaze and turned her face away slightly. Beloved, the person I love the most is you, the emperor said affectionately. Huijun blushed and immediately thought of something. She said, You don't blame me anymore? When did I blame you? The Dongqing emperor said. That's all that unfilial son's fault. Why should I blame you? Huijun's heart calmed down. She blushed shyly, which made people's throats itch. Then what about Prince Changshu? He's leading troops and has a fake imperial edict forged by the fourth prince. It's okay. I'll send someone to ask him to go back. If he refuses, The Dongqing emperor comforted Huijun gently. Don't be afraid. I wish I could hurt myself, but I can't bear to hurt you. Why are you so stupid? Take good care of yourself and give birth to 8 or 10 royal children for me in the future. Huijun was extremely shy when she heard this. Of course, she was laughing non-stop in her heart. She would rather give birth to a pig's child than this disgusting animal in front of her. Looking at the emperor's back as he left, Huijun, who was originally weak, snorted coldly and fell asleep on her side. When the earthquake in Shangjing happened, Wu Majun asked her to find a way to get the emperor's private seal. She used all kinds of excuses to delay it for more than a month. She would be distracted from time to time in front of the emperor, her eyes filled with struggle and pain. Later, Wuma Jun was forced into a corner. She had to steal the emperor's private seal and fool around with him again. That night, she secretly asked someone to get an abortion pill. Of course, she was definitely not pregnant. After all, her body had been ruined in her early years. Perhaps she would never have the chance to be a mother in this lifetime, so it was fine to take the abortion pill. However, her carelessness was discovered by the emperor. Under his relentless questioning, she painfully revealed that Wuma Jun had forced himself on her during the day. She also revealed that Wuma Jun had asked for the emperor's private seal. In order to prevent Wuma Jun from being eliminated so quickly, she begged the emperor not to pursue this matter. For this, she put in a lot of effort. She drank medicine and tried to commit suicide. In any case, she wouldn't die. The people the emperor had arranged to be by her side wouldn't let anything happen to her. Therefore, Huijun was having a good time. The emperor, on the other hand, was exhausted. Perhaps the emperor also wanted to see what Wuma Jun was going to do with his personal seal. Perhaps her pleading had worked, so he had been holding it in for the past few days. Until he accidentally received news that Prince Changshu had led his troops to Qinzhou. The emperor was instantly enraged, and that was what had happened just now. Huijun did not understand politics, but she knew one thing. It's easier to invite the devil in than to send him away. Prince Changshu rushed over from Kaifeng with hundreds of thousands of troops. He was ambitious, so how could he be willing to be sent back? It would be best if they fought until their faces were red and their necks were swollen. Their brothers would quarrel with each other, and they would not be in the mood to care about the news from the north. She would find a way to kill anything that could threaten her Langjun in the cradle. For example, the ambitious princess of the northern borderline. Huijun used her status to torment her. His mind was filled with all sorts of nonsense. Huijun yawned lazily. She thought about whether she should jump into the water to commit suicide tomorrow, or continue to lie in bed and pretend to be pitiful. When she thought of Wuma Jun and his son, she secretly rolled her eyes. How could such filthy people be the noblest royal family in the world? Huijun did not like palace fights. In addition, the emperor valued her. He slowly arranged for more and more confidants. The conspiracies in the harem could not be used in front of her. However, as an arrogant and pampered imperial concubine, it did not mean that she would not cause trouble for others. It was boring on the road. Bullying the emperor's beautiful concubines and the old and faded empress became her daily routine. Bring me the bronze mirror. Huijun had just fallen asleep when she thought of something. She ordered the palace maid to bring the bronze mirror. Her body was getting healthier. In order to maintain her sickly appearance, she did not torment herself into a serious illness. Instead, the palace maids around her fell ill one after another. She opened her watery eyes and saw that the woman in the mirror was still as beautiful as ever. She sighed faintly. Why was there such a stunning beauty in the world? Daily Narcissism 1/1. Completed. Huijun was not a person who paid much attention to her appearance. However, she faintly realized that such a perfect body had something to do with her Langjun. What kind of method could make a person with average looks become a beauty that could cause the downfall of a city? Huijun felt that this was probably the method of a deity. Thus, she slowly began to pay attention to herself in the mirror. She compared herself in the mirror with the one in her memory. Gradually, she developed the habit of looking at herself in the mirror. She enjoyed it very much. Wuma Jun's injuries were serious. He was unconscious for most of the night. The medical officer used the best medicine to pull him back from the gates of hell. Seeing that Wuma Jun had woken up, Lu Huan heaved a sigh of relief. "Husband, you're awake." She was only 13 years old. Her figure was petite and weak. However, her belly was very big. It was only 5 months, but her belly was bulging like a balloon. It was as if she had been pregnant for 8 or 9 months. It made people feel heavy just by looking at her. If an ordinary woman was pregnant with such a big belly, her complexion would not be good. However, Lu Huan was different. Her complexion was getting better day by day. Even her footsteps were lighter. Many servants secretly suspected that there was a problem with the 4th imperial concubine's belly. Could it be a fake pregnancy? Before this ridiculous rumor could spread, Lu Huan had already dragged the person out and beaten him to death. She was pregnant with the precious royal grandson. Who said that it was a fake pregnancy? Jun woke up and looked straight up. He did not say a word. However, deep in his eyes, a thick and dense hatred was brewing. Husband, drink some ginseng soup. I personally brewed it for you. Lu Huan tried hard to fight for Jun's love. Unfortunately, this person did not touch her except on their wedding night. She knew that Jun still had that B*teeth Jun in his heart. Get lost. Jun raised his hand and knocked the bowl of ginseng soup to the ground. His face was ferocious. His eyes were bloodshot. He looked very terrifying. In the north of Dongqing, it had become a battlefield for the Tsing-Yi army and the Red Lotus group. The people were mourning. Only Xiangyang district had become a pure paradise. The construction progress was getting faster and faster. The entire district was full of vitality. The forces in the south of Dongqing were even more nervous. Prince Changshu did not obey the imperial edict and refused to return to his fief. His ambition was obvious. Under such circumstances, the forces in the north borderline also began to stir. Lu Shi returned to Chongzhou under such circumstances. He took a brief look at the government affairs during this period of time. He discovered that there were faint rumors in the north borderline. Obviously, they felt that the time was ripe. They wanted to take advantage of Dongqing's complete weakness to destroy Dongqing in one fell swoop and occupy the central plains at the lowest cost. Their ambition was not small. Lu Shi roughly estimated the situation in Dongqing and sneered coldly in his heart. Before the three tribes of the north borderline made a move against him, he would first make a move against them. Crack. Lu Shi took a bite of the seasonal fruit. His mouth watered. He waved his hand and summoned his butler. The Lu residents had many businesses in the open and in the dark. Their business network had already spread throughout the north borderline. This was an invisible intelligence network. Before the outbreak of chaos, he wanted to make a fortune. Otherwise, when the north borderline completely declared war on Dongqing, such good business would be rare. Thinking of the 20 sets of exceptional treasures, Lu Shi's smile grew wider. Chapter 443. The northern borderline was vast and had a small population. Coupled with the years of war, it was difficult for the people to survive. In the past 20 years, the royal family of the northern borderline, under the suggestion of the wise ones, finally agreed to cultivate and recuperate. They encouraged the people to have children and actively opened up business and trade with neighboring countries. Without a doubt, this policy was very correct. Today, the three tribes of the northern borderline were prosperous and lively. The country was extremely powerful. More than a decade ago, they launched a sneak attack on the border of Dongqing and took over the three cities of Chongzhou and Shangyu County. This made the northern borderline arrogant. They even thought that they had the absolute power to enter the central plains. After all, Dongqing was too weak now. It could not withstand the ravages of their armored cavalry. The country's demise was imminent. The wise ones of the northern borderline realized this and hurriedly beat them down. Only then did they manage to suppress the impetuousness and arrogance of the northern borderline. In recent years, Princess Yaina had interfered. Dongqing's political situation had become more and more chaotic. The country's power had plummeted. In the eyes of the northern borderline, Dongqing was already in the bag. As soon as their king of the northern borderline gave the order, they could mobilize their troops to attack Dongqing. Under such circumstances, the king of the northern borderline could no longer hold back his pride. The king's authority was getting stronger and stronger. Until now, the wise one's honest and harsh words had aroused the king's disgust. This impetuous and arrogant atmosphere affected the entire northern borderline from top to bottom. Wu Liba, the strategist of the northern borderline's wise ones, seemed rough and rash, but he was actually a meticulous strategist. He realized the hidden dangers of the superficial arrogance in the northern borderline. He had advised the king of the northern borderline several times. No matter how weak Dongqing was, it was once one of the top 5 in the central plains. They should be extremely cautious when facing this enemy. Since ancient times, were there any lack of examples of arrogant soldiers being defeated? However, no matter how Wu Liba quoted from the classics, the king of the northern borderline did not listen. He even berated him harshly. Faced with this situation, Wu Liba was both worried and sad. He was not afraid of anything else. He was afraid that the northern borderline would become arrogant and look down on the enemy because of a small victory. Today he was scolded by the king of the northern borderline again because of his advice. He hoped that the king of the northern borderline would order an order to restrain the excessive extravagance of the subjects and the exaggerated status of showing off their wealth. He pointed out the shortcomings and spoke generously, but the king of the northern borderline did not accept it. Wu Liba sighed. This was not a good thing for the north borderline, but he could do nothing about it. He couldn't tell when it started, but this demonic wind and evil qi had spread throughout the entire northern borderline. Filled with rage, Wu Liba returned home, exhausted both physically and mentally. A few female slaves came forward to serve him. He waited for a long time but did not see his wife. His thick eyebrows were tightly knitted together and his eyes were filled with undisguised unhappiness. He really looked down on this crude and uncultured wife of his. However, this marriage was fought for by Wu Liba's elders. Because his wife's maiden family ran a trading company, their wealth was well known in the northern borderline. When he marched to war, he needed the help of this generous wife to supply his rations. On account of this, Wu Liba felt that he could still tolerate this wife. However, men, especially men from the northern borderline, which one of them didn't want a shrewish wife to be gentle to them? This was a thought that even Wu Liba could not avoid. He had a strong desire to possess and control his wife. If he returned home one day and did not see his wife, Wu Liba's mood would become very bad. The northern borderline did not value a woman's chastity. There was no such thing as loyalty between husband and wife. If the wife was not satisfied with or did not like her husband, she might turn around and have an affair or keep a gigolo. Wu Liba believed that he was well versed in the culture of the Central Plains. Of course, he could not accept his wife climbing over the wall to find a man. Whenever his wife was not within his sight, Wu Liba could not help but worry that she was fooling around with a gigolo. He was in a bad mood and asked the female slave in a gruff voice, "Where did Madame go?" The female slave replied with trepidation, "Madame went out with a few other noble ladies. She will be back in about 4 hours." Hearing this, Wu Liba's mood became even worse. He snorted angrily, "Lead the way, let's go take a look." His wife was already crude and uncultured. If she mingled with those women, how could her upbringing be good? At this moment, Wu Liba's wife was shopping heroically. Yes, shopping. When people went out to shop, they did not buy the good ones, only the expensive ones. One person could buy up an entire street. Her family was rich and the northern borderline valued women very much. Hence, Wu Liba's wife did not lack money. Moreover, her husband was a brave general of the northern borderline. He was from the Wise Ones clan and was highly respected. Even the king of the northern borderline had to treat him with respect. Wu Liba's wife's life could not be more comfortable. When she was bored, she would bring a group of sisters to sweep the streets. Now, a group of northern borderline noble ladies were eagerly waiting for the treasure house's shopkeeper to deliver the treasures. "Ladies, sorry to keep you waiting." The treasure house's shopkeeper was of mixed blood. He had the gentleness and elegance of a man from the Central Plains, but also the boldness and valiance of a man from the northern borderline. If not for the fact that he was already 45 years old and had a few granddaughters and grandsons, many high-ranking officials in the northern borderline would not be at ease to let their wives frequent the treasure house. This man was too charismatic. If he were to sleep with his wife while shopping, it would be a grievance. The shop often sold precious smuggled goods. This was also the favorite place of the northern borderline's aristocrats because the goods were good and expensive. The man held a box steadily in both hands. His slightly thin lips spoke in an elegant and tactful tone. These noble ladies even dared to press their husbands to the ground and beat them up. Usually when they shouted, their voices could be heard from miles away. However, in front of this elegant middle-aged man, they could not help but display the demeanor of a lady. They patiently waited for him to slowly open the box and reveal the rare treasures inside. "This is a colored glaze ware. Ladies, please take a look." After the box was opened, the ladies' eyes were all attracted by the items lying quietly in the box. Wu Liba's wife only came to her senses after a while. She opened her mouth and asked, "Mr. Shopkeeper, how much are these treasures?" The shopkeeper said, "This is a set of tea ware. The quality and workmanship are rare in the world. The price is a little expensive." Wu Liba's wife said with a smile, "Could it be that shopkeeper is worried that I cannot afford it?" The shopkeeper said, "Madam must be joking. Madame's family is rich enough to rival a country. Everyone in the Central Plains knows that. How could Madame not be able to afford it? Even if you really cannot afford it for Madame's sake, this set of treasures should lower its price and beg you to take it away. A treasure should be matched with a beautiful woman. Only a beautiful woman like Madame can bring out its value. Madame Wu Liba's cheeks reddened. The smile on her face grew brighter. Shopkeeper is really getting better at talking. There was no woman who did not like to be praised. Madame Wu Liba was even more so. Although the other ladies were not as rich as this one, they were also extravagant. They hurriedly inquired about the price. The shopkeeper's eyelids narrowed slightly. He said gently, "This set is of above-average quality. It is not considered the best. Therefore it is only sold for 25,000 strings of coins." 25,000 strings of coins? This price made many of the ladies hesitate. It was not that they could not afford it, but they felt that it was slightly expensive. Chapter 444. Why didn't he bring out the best? Of course, it was to test the ladies' acceptance of these colored glaze wares. Otherwise, how could he set the highest price? The shopkeeper still had a smile on his face as he calmly pacified her. "Madam, please don't blame me. I'm not being rude to you, it's just that. Say, if this humble shop brought out the best treasures, it would raise your standards. When that time comes, what treasures should this humble shop bring out to attract your attention and make you linger here?" Madame Wu Liba blushed and clicked her tongue. "Just bring out the best, why are you worrying about this? Could it be that all the things this madam had bought from you over the years were all fake? Good or bad, when did I not take care of your business?" The shopkeeper smiled warmly and turned to go upstairs to retrieve the set of glass tea wares that he wanted to sell at a high price. The previous set was already eye-catching enough, but in front of this set, even the slightest flaw was magnified. Madame Wu Liba said directly, "I want this set." Shopkeeper, just quote the price directly. You won't miss a cent or a copper coin. The shopkeeper smiled helplessly and said, "If any businessman were to meet such an easygoing customer like you, he would wake up laughing even in his dreams." Madame Wu Liba asked boldly, "Shopkeeper, will you laugh tonight because of me?" Of course. Originally, the owner had set the price at 20,000 to 30,000 strings of coins, but the shopkeeper felt that there was still room for appreciation. Wasn't the most successful businessman trying to maximize the value of a product? He pondered in his heart and did not speak too confidently, in case there were better quality colored glaze wares next time and it would be difficult to clean up the mess. If these rich ladies were to kick up a fuss, his old bones would not be able to handle it. With a quick thought, he already had a way to deal with it. He said, "This set is the best in this batch. It's slightly more expensive than the previous set, 41,000 strings of coins." Madame Wu Liba was not stupid. She understood the meaning behind his words. "Shopkeeper, are you saying that there will be better colored glaze wares? How could that do?" If she was going to buy, she had to buy the most expensive one. Only then would it match her status. The shopkeeper took out the prepared draft and said, "Ladies, do you know the origin of these colored glaze wares?" The madams shook their heads. "I don't know. I've never heard of it." They were also used to seeing good things. There were not many treasures smuggled and sold in the treasure house, but there were almost none that were as beautiful as the colored glaze wares that could awaken their dead young girls' hearts with just a glance. Although colored glaze wares were a little expensive, it wasn't that they couldn't afford them. However, they had to buy things that were worth it or else they would lose their value. There's a strange record of the Great Xia dynasty. There was a golden phoenix descending from the sky of the Plum region, and at the same time a baby girl was born. This baby girl was one of the founding fathers of the Great Xia dynasty. After her death, she was conferred the title of Marquis of Immerse, Duke Su. The shopkeeper explained in detail to the madams, "These colored glass artifacts were found at the place where the golden phoenix landed. Each one of them is magnificent. It's just that the person who discovered it was too crude and ignorant, causing some damage to the glazed artifact. It's no longer as stunning as it was before." Madame Wu Liba was the most cultured among the madams and she loved to show off her culture. She said, "I've heard of this story before. It's said that Marquis of Immerse, Duke Su, had the life of a golden phoenix. She was a goddess who descended from the heavens. These colored glaze wares, could they be celestial items that came with Duke Su from the heavenly palace?" The shopkeeper hesitated and said, I don't know about this. These colored glazewares have been buried deep underground for hundreds of years. A while ago the earthquake in Dongqing allowed them to see the light of day. The store had to expend a lot of resources to get a few sets of them. Now we're still thinking of ways to get more. The set in front of us is the best one in our shop's collection. When the madams heard this, they couldn't help but be surprised. Their already wavering hearts became even more one-sided. Even if they didn't have a legendary background, they were still tempted. Now that they heard this story, they wanted to snatch it. Madame Wu Liba saw the expressions of the madams and secretly regretted it. Why did she mention celestial items for no reason? The shopkeeper took in their expressions and smiled warmly. Madam, do you want to buy them? Madame Wu Liba decisively made the decision. Without waiting for the others to speak, she said, Of course I want to buy them. It's just 41,000 strings of coins. Shopkeeper, wrap them up and send them to my house. Also, if you have better colored glazewares here, don't forget to inform me. The few madams actually wanted to buy them at a higher price. However, this treasure house had its own rules and wouldn't resell them. If they increased the price, they might even offend Madame Wu Liba. It really wasn't worth it. Every treasure had a price. If a customer was the first to buy it at the set price, even if the subsequent customers increased the price by 100 times, they wouldn't resell it. The few madams were regular customers. Of course, they knew the shopkeeper's temperament. The more upright he was, the more it showed his strength of character. He was obsessed with earning money, but he didn't stink of money. Many noble ladies from the north borderline wanted to invite him to be their guest. However, he was loyal to his wife. The Princess Royal of the North Borderline had also offered him an olive branch, but he wasn't moved. He had such strength of character, humor, looks, and talent. There wasn't a single part of him that wasn't good. How could he not be attractive? Another plump madam opened her mouth. Shopkeeper, take out all the colored glazewares here. The shopkeeper smiled and agreed. He personally brought them out. When the 9 sets of glass tea wares were lined up, the dazzling sight made even some madams who didn't have any intention of buying feel tempted. At this moment there was only one thought in everyone's mind. Don't be afraid of the price. Buy. The shopkeeper had been dealing with these noble ladies for many years. He naturally knew their extravagant purchasing power. They always bought the most expensive and not the best. These 9 sets of glass tea wares, the cheapest was 23,000 strings of coins. Excluding Madame Wu Liba's set, the most expensive was 33,000 strings of coins. The few madams bought 5 sets and kept the 4 cheapest sets. The total was 146,000 strings of coins. This money was easy to earn. It was even better than robbing. The shopkeeper sighed silently in his heart. He admired his young master even more. He had seen his old master Madame Gu's money-making methods. Ever since Madame Gu passed away, the shopkeeper had never seen someone who was more ruthless in earning money than robbing a bank. He met Madame Gu's child. He could only sigh with emotion. When Lu Shi asked him for help, his heart that had been dead for a long time came back to life. He loved to earn money, but he loved the thrill of tricking people even more. He had obviously slaughtered the customers until not even their bones were left, but the other party still felt that he had earned a lot. Based on Madame Gu's evaluation of him, it was probably because he had gained intellectual satisfaction from a mentally handicapped customer. In short, the feeling of superiority was indeed addicting to the shopkeeper. Chapter 445. Madame Wu Liba paused and asked, "What else?" The treasure house was the most famous smuggler and antique shop in the northern borderline. There was no most expensive item, only more expensive. Many nobles in the northern borderline frequented this shop to show off their status. To be honest, this shop had a wide network of connections. Almost anything could be obtained. Most importantly, the background of the shop was very clean, which was reassuring. "Ladies, please wait a moment. I'll bring it for you to see." With that, the shopkeeper went upstairs and brought back a red sandalwood box the size of a grown man's palm. The outside was carved with complicated and gorgeous patterns. A strange fragrance wafted in the air. Many ladies were curious and wanted to stretch their necks to take a look. But they still sat where they were, waiting for the shopkeeper to bring out their precious children. "Ladies, please take a look." With that, the shopkeeper opened the hidden button with his well-maintained and fair fingers, revealing the treasure inside. There was plenty of light in the room, and the bright light reflected from the light blinded their eyes, almost making them unable to open their eyes. There was even a madam who was so scared that she raised her hand to cover her eyes. Her beautiful face turned pale and her rough voice became sharp. She screamed in surprise, "Ah, what is this? How can it be so dazzling?" After a while the crowd slowly adjusted to it. Sounds of inhaling could be heard in the room. Inside the red sandalwood box was an exquisite dragon and phoenix hairpin. The hairpin was crystal clear and came from the same source as the previous colored glasswares. A dragon and a phoenix were entwined together. The dragon's scales and phoenix's feathers were fine and lifelike. The phoenix spread its wings ready to fly. The dragon looked like it was about to soar into the sky. Between the phoenix and the dragon's mouth, there was a string of transparent beads strung together to form tassels. Under the sunlight, it was so beautiful that one could not take their eyes off it. The shopkeeper carefully took it out. The beads collided slightly and the crisp sound was very pleasing to the ear. Lucy gave him 20 glass tea wares and the dragon and phoenix hairpin. He was allowed to decide the price. Seeing the eyes of the nobles in the northern borderline, the shopkeeper knew that the dragon and phoenix hairpin could be sold for a very good price. Women could not like exquisite antiques, but they could not resist the temptation of dazzling jewelry. The shopkeeper smiled warmly. It took a lot of effort to get this. "Ladies, please take a look. What do you think?" Madame Wu Liba shouted, "Buy." "Shopkeeper, please be straightforward and quote a price." The other madams were not willing. What? They had bought the best glaze and they still wanted to monopolize this peerless treasure. The plump lady raised her chin slightly, her eyes slanting. She said unhappily, "Madame Wu, this isn't right. Everyone didn't say that they wouldn't buy it, so how could they let you buy it all? I also want to buy this hairpin. Shopkeeper, we are old acquaintances and know the rules here. Why don't we go to the highest bidder?" The shopkeeper knew how to maximize the value, and he also knew that this kind of transparent and dazzling jewelry could not only be sold once, so he couldn't be too ruthless the first time, or else he wouldn't be able to make use of it in the future. This principle was the same as raising pigs and only killing them during festivals. Because they were fat, it would feel good to slaughter them. "Madams, please listen to me. There's news from my store that there's more than one piece of jewelry." The shopkeeper spoke up to ease the atmosphere. "It's just that they're currently in someone else's hands. It'll take some time to get them. Madams, if you can wait for a while, then you can buy it again. Don't hurt the harmony." When the madams heard this, their expressions turned slightly better. They believed in the shopkeeper's ability, and indeed he could get whatever he wanted. However, the earlier they bought, the earlier they could enjoy. There were only so many treasures, but there were many people fighting over them. When the reputation of this dragon phoenix hairpin spread, who knew how many northern borderline madams would want to buy it? How many competitors would there be then? Thinking of this, everyone had their own thoughts. At this moment, a familiar male voice came from outside. Madame Wu Liba's expression changed and she was faintly unhappy. The shopkeeper secretly raised his eyebrows. He had long heard of the reputation of the northern borderline's fierce General Wu Liba, but this was the first time he had seen him in person. If it was an ordinary person, he would probably be so frightened that he would bow and scrape or even make a fool of himself. But who was the shopkeeper? He had dealings with many northern borderline nobles. Back then, the Princess Royal of the northern borderline had a crush on him, and wanted him to be her guest. He had managed to deal with such a large entourage, so why would he be afraid of Wu Liba? On the other side, when Wu Liba found out that his wife had spent 41,000 strings of coins to buy a set of flashy but impractical items, his face turned green with anger. "It's just something to scare people. You're quite generous, wife. You don't even know that you've been cheated," Wu Liba said. Madame Wu Liba snorted and rolled her eyes at her husband. Pointing at the set of glass tea sets, she said, "You say that I've been cheated. Then why don't you tell me where they came from? Haven't you been to Dongqing and have a deep understanding of the customs and objects there? You can tell that they're not ordinary. Then why don't you take a look and see if they're treasures?" Wu Liba was choked by his own wife and was momentarily speechless. His brown-black face was twisted together. After a long while he said embarrassedly, "They look like porcelain." Nowadays there was already the technology to bake porcelain. However, the porcelain that was produced was mostly of poor quality. There were crisscrossing cracks on the surface. There were not many that looked good, so most of the people in the Central Plains still used pottery. As for porcelain, Wu Liba kept a set in his study. He often played with it. Porcelain was considered a luxury item in the Central Plains. The shopkeeper curled his lips and said in a warm voice, "Porcelain is mostly green or gray in color. It's of poor quality and is made from ordinary clay. Although I don't know what material is used to make these colored glasswares, they are clear and shiny. The texture is crisp and does not look like something from the mortal world. How can mere porcelain be compared to them?" Wu Liba heard this and could not explain it. He had some understanding of the things in the Central Plains, but he had indeed never seen anything made of this material. The color of the clay on the ground was mostly gray, black, yellow, and brown. It was impossible to make it transparent. Madame Wu Liba saw that he could not say anything and said angrily, "Humph, it's not your money. Why are you so distressed?" Wu Liba became more and more embarrassed, but he did not dare to argue with his wife, lest others laugh at him. Seeing the shopkeeper frown and lower his eyes, he became even angrier. The culture of the North Borderline was so superficial and extravagant. It was impossible to avoid this treasure house. Even if other similar shops popped up like mushrooms after the rain, the treasure house still sat firmly on the fishing platform. Who knew how much money it had earned over the years? Wu Liba was furious. "It's you scoundrels who make the North Borderline so luxurious." The shopkeeper said smoothly, "General, you are wrong. Life is short. You have tens of thousands of taels of silver at home. You can enjoy delicacies from the land and sea. Why do you still have to live like this? Your wife is of high status. Her clothes and daily necessities should be in line with her status. Otherwise, how is this different from wearing silk clothes and walking at night?" The shopkeeper's words could also be translated as, "You don't have money to buy for your wife. Your wife will buy for herself. Why are you blabbering?" Chapter 446. Wu Liba had nothing to say and could only glare at the shopkeeper with his bell-like eyes. The shopkeeper was still as graceful as ever. With Wu Liba as a teammate who was a burden, Wu Liba's wife was unable to purchase the dragon and phoenix hairpin. Under the persuasion of the shopkeeper, it was bought by a noblewoman for the price of 57,000 strings of coins. The lady took off the pearls on her head on the spot and put on the dragon and phoenix hairpin. The tassels and pearls collided with each other as she walked, making a pleasant tinkling sound. When she walked under the sun, the bright and beautiful colors made her the center of attention. The other ladies saw it and felt even more regret. Wu Liba's wife was so angry that her face turned green. If it wasn't for her husband dragging her down, the hairpin would have definitely belonged to her. Now it was on someone else's head. She suppressed her anger and repeatedly reminded the shopkeeper to inform her immediately if there was any stock. The shopkeeper agreed with a smile, but only he knew what he was thinking in his heart. The easier it was to get something, the less valuable it was. He would let these ladies covet the dragon and phoenix hairpin for a while. When they were done with jealousy and hatred, he would introduce new glass jewelry. Would he still have to worry about not being able to sell it at a high price? Although the wise ones were an eyesore, they were indeed much smarter than the simple-minded people of the northern borderline. The shopkeeper had lived in the northern borderline for so many years and knew the internal situation of the northern borderline very well. Now that Dongqing was in chaos, if he did not prepare early, he was afraid that he would not be able to stop the northern borderline's cavalry. As a merchant, the only thing he could do was to earn more money from the people of the northern borderline and make the atmosphere here more welcoming to foreigners. Since ancient times, it was easiest to earn money from women and children. His old boss's words were indeed wise. The northern borderline had no shortage of gold and silver. Such a large transaction could not be done with scattered copper coins. Naturally, it had to be converted into gold, silver, and jewelry. Therefore, when the gold and silver worth a total of 203,000 strings of coins was delivered to the shop, even the shopkeeper, who was used to seeing large amounts of money, could not help but sigh. This money is simply easier to earn than the wind. Because the treasure house did a lot of smuggling business, there was a price difference between the two places. Therefore, when he took out a sum of money to buy 500 horses of medium quality and nearly 10,000 sheepskins, no one suspected anything. They only thought that the treasure house was going to Dongqing to make a fortune from the war. The northern borderline produced many good horses. The treasure house did not buy the best war horses, so it did not matter if they sold them. As for the sheepskin, they did not care about it. Every household had such a thing, and even if they laid it on the ground as a street stall, the smell would still be too strong. Therefore, when this batch of resources was transported back to Chongzhou with the remaining gold, silver and jewelry, no one pursued the matter. When Lu Shi saw this, he let out a long sigh. Money that comes with the wind. The shopkeeper had already returned to his Central Plains attire. He wore a crown on his head and a wide-sleeved coat. Other than his face being more profound than the people from the Central Plains, he looked like a native of Dongqing. He was amused by Lu Shi's words. So much gold, silver and jewelry. How strong must the wind be to blow them up? Lu Shi choked and put his hand to his forehead. He said helplessly, Your mouth is getting sharper. Ever since Gu Min passed away, the shopkeeper had not set foot in Dongqing for many years. If Lu Shi did not believe in the shopkeeper's loyalty to Gu Min, he would not have dared to hand over the business of the second branch of the Lu family to manage. Now that he had personally come back, Lu Shi was quite surprised. In the past, when I asked you to come back during festivals, you said you were not feeling well. Why did you come back now? The shopkeeper squinted slightly and said, I came back to see the young master. The business that Gu Min ran should be inherited by a descendant. The shopkeeper had been quite worried before, but now he was not. In terms of business, the young master was much more ruthless than the old master. The old master was at least doing proper business, but the young master was directly robbing. Lu Shi asked, What about these sheepskins and horses? The shopkeeper said softly, In another month the weather will start to turn cold. The earthquake in Dongqing has turned the north into a shuraba. The people have lost their homes. How much money can they bring with them? This winter will not be easy. These sheepskins are cheap. If we find a way to remove the stench and make them into clothes, they should be warmer than ordinary linen. The shopkeeper continued, As for horses, the northern borderline iron cavalry is already mature, but in Dongqing, how can an army fight without horses? These horses are not in good condition and do not have the bloodline of war horses. They are often slaughtered for meat, so it will not arouse suspicion. Because it was the first time, the shopkeeper could not buy too much. He could only plan slowly. Lu Shi was silent for a while. You are more careful than I am. I thank you on behalf of Lanting. I have used my connections to buy a batch of food in Hu County. Send it to Lanting when the time comes. She has managed it well. She is indeed the daughter that Amin has high hopes for. She was the first female empress in history. How could she not be outstanding? The shopkeeper said, The parents are extraordinary, so the children are naturally extraordinary. After saying that, the shopkeeper seemed to have thought of something. He frowned and asked, How is your control over Hu County now? Lu Shi smiled. It's all right. Although he had been transferred to Chongzhou to be the Chongzhou magistrate, Hu County was the base camp that he had managed for many years. The new chief of Hu County appointed by the Dongqing emperor was too weak. He had not been able to completely control Hu County after a few years. He was also unlucky to encounter the earthquake in the north. The royal family moved the capital and the entire court's prestige was greatly reduced. Now he was only an honorary chief with an empty title. Otherwise, how could Lu Shi have the ability to use his connections to buy a large batch of autumn food? After a few years, he had already accumulated a large amount of rice. It was definitely enough to support the northern battlefield. However, his daughter seemed to have other plans. Lu Shi did not make a move and was prepared to act according to his daughter's intentions. Lu Shi asked the shopkeeper to bring 200,000 dawn of food first. He also sent 5,000 infantrymen and 2,000 cavalry archers to escort them. The north was in chaos now. The Red Lotus Group and the Tsing-Yi army were fighting fiercely. If they were not careful along the way, they might lose everything. In the blink of an eye, it was the middle of September. The heat of summer gradually subsided. The people of Xiangyang district changed into cool autumn clothes. Feng Jin's Chongqing was already 5 months old. He was lively and active. She could often roll from one corner of the room to the other. She was also impatient to stay in the house. She often wanted to roll out of the room. When the maidservants wanted to carry her, she would make a squeaking sound and slap their hands. If they carried her stubbornly, her crying voice could be heard far away. She still cried without tears. Over time, Feng Jin and his wife also let the child be. However, they never expected that the older the child, the more willful her temperament became. For example, today she especially clung to Feng Jin. She hugged his sleeves and refused to let go. She tried her best to crawl into his sleeves. Zhou Xian, carry Chongqing away. If I don't go to the government office, Lanting will mock me again. Chongqing probably understood the meaning of Feng Jin's words. She held her mouth and silently wept. Tears fell one by one. She did not cry or howl. She looked at Feng Jin silently and cried silently. After a while she became a tearful person. Wei Jingxian's heart ached. She really could not bear to see her child cry. She could only say dotingly, "Should we hide Chongqing and bring her over?" Chapter 447. Then you coax her. If Chongqing's eyes get hurt from crying, won't you feel bad? Wei Jingxian put a big label on Feng Jin. Feng Jin was speechless. He looked down at his daughter who was grabbing his sleeve and refused to let go. Feng Jin shook his head helplessly. I really owed you and your daughter in my previous life. Therefore, Feng Jin's posture when he went to the government office today was a little strange. The people below did not dare to ask. At most they looked at him strangely. Feng Jin went to the government office shamelessly. Because it was still early, he quietly went to his seat, pulled a cushion over and hid the lump of fat sleeve under the low table. However, Chongqing's temper was hard to understand. She was very obedient on the way, but once she entered the government office, she did not want to stay in his sleeve anymore. Huayu, what's wrong with you? Qiguan Rang's work was about to end. Nearly 80% of the people had completed their registration. His work was not so rushed. He simply slowed down his pace and no longer worked overtime crazily. He ate and slept well every day. After a few days, his thin and sunken cheeks had also regained some flesh. He looked a little more plump and his complexion was rosy. Therefore, during this period, the first person to come to the government office was often not him, but either Feng Jin or Su Ku. Feng Jin felt his daughter struggling and his expression changed slightly. No, nothing. He was about to grab his little daughter back, but she rolled out of his sleeve unexpectedly. Qiguan Rang was shocked. He looked at Feng Jin, then looked at the chubby girl. He opened his mouth but could not say anything for a long time. I didn't expect that you, Feng Huayu, are also involved in human trafficking, right? Qiguan Rang's mind changed. He had clearly guessed the identity of the little girl, but he still laughed and joked. Feng Jin's face turned red. He simply gave up and closed his eyes to admit it. Chongqing is too clingy. This morning she grabbed my sleeve and refused to let go. After crying silently for a quarter of an hour, I really could not bear to bring her here. She is very obedient. She doesn't even cry normally. If you give her something, she can play with it for a long time. Qiguan Rang reached out to Chongqing. I didn't say that your daughter is noisy. Come, eldest niece, let Uncle Qiguan hug you. Qiguan Rang was actually very fond of children. His first wife had passed away due to illness and did not leave behind any children. Later on, he married Master Wei Yuan's eldest concubine's daughter. The two of them were very loving after their marriage and only gave birth to a daughter 2 years later. However, he felt that it was chaotic outside and did not bring the mother and daughter with him when he left Chongzhou. Chongqing was friendly and bold. She climbed up Qiguan Rang's clothes. Her movements were swift. Her hands and feet are really strong. Sister-in-law is really good at raising children. Qiguan Rang's posture of carrying the child was very standard. Chongqing was not afraid of him. She reached out and wanted to touch his hair crown. Feng Jin secretly turned his face away. This daughter of his was too bold and aggressive. She did not have the slightest hint of gentleness that a woman of the Feng family should have. Chongqing was very generous and gave Qiguan Rang a wet, saliva-dripping kiss on his face. Pop, after the Grand Prince, she smiled and opened her mouth, revealing a small row of teeth that had just emerged. Your daughter is more likable than you. Qiguan Rang made a brief comment. Unlikable Feng Jin, let her play by herself. Don't disturb you. Although Feng Jin had brought Chongqing over, he did not want to delay his colleague's work because of this. It's all right. The child is still too young. If I don't keep an eye on her, she will easily get into trouble. Qiguan Rang's main job was to be responsible for registration and sorting out the household register. Fortunately, he still had 9 girls who were busy at his side. As his immediate superior, it was fine for him to be a little lazy. You, on the other hand, haven't finished sorting out the case files. I'm afraid you'll be busy for a while. Feng Jin was speechless. He watched helplessly as Qiguan Rang carried his daughter to the side and played with her. In just a short while, his daughter was already glued to Qiguan Rang. Whose daughter was this? Chongqing giggled. Her big eyes were about to turn into slits. She climbed up and down Qiguan Rang's body intimately. Not long after, Suku also arrived. Seeing that there was an additional girl in the government office, he raised his eyebrows and walked around as if there was no one around. He was extremely cold. Be careful. Hide the child well in case the Lord sees her and snatches her from you, Suku said in a low voice. Qiguan Rang raised his eyebrows. Don't worry. With the Lord's temperament, she will not come every day. Jiang Pingji did not come to the government office every day. Every day she was either playing with mud or playing with wood. During this period of time, she was almost always in the carpentry workshop, working on some siege weapon model. Meng Hun and Lu Yue seemed to be absent-minded. They ran behind her all day. Specifically, they ran behind those models. On the other hand, Li Yun recorded the cultivated fields and divided them carefully. He was prepared to rent them out to each household during spring plowing. Issues such as farming tools and cattle were also put on the agenda. Li Yun still had to follow orders to Qingda County to purchase grain seeds. He was so busy that his feet barely touched the ground. The construction of the district town had already reached the 3rd stage. The main roads in the city were basically completed. The roads were paved with bluestone bricks. Even when it rained, the roads were still clean. In Xiangyang district, there was a place that the people called the Noble District. There were rows upon rows of newly built houses. It was extremely beautiful. Speaking of the Noble District, one had to mention the 20 girls that Jiang Pingji had previously taken in. Most of them came from wealthy families or country gentlemen's families. Jiang Pingji returned their family property to them after settling the accounts. They expressed that they were willing to pay for a new house. After all, their old houses had been destroyed. Some of the land had been reclaimed by the district headquarters. They had nowhere to go. Seeing the new house that was being built uniformly, everyone was tempted. You are now considered a part of the district headquarters. You have helped the district headquarters greatly. Indeed, you should be rewarded according to your contributions. Let's do it this way. The 5th batch of 2-level houses will be built for 4,000 strings of coins each. If you can't afford it, you can pay a deposit first and the rest will be paid in installments. If you agree, I will sign a new contract for you. Faced with the requests of the girls, Jiang Pingji thought for a while and came up with a compromise. Do you have any thoughts of entering the district headquarters to work? You can choose to pay with grain or money of equivalent value. They could still manage the manpower they had now, but when their territory expanded in the future, they would probably go crazy with work. Taking advantage of the buffer time, they should first train a group of people. If they needed more people in the future, they could directly send them over. Just thinking about it made them happy. The girls listened to Jiang Pingji's suggestion and opened their eyes wide in surprise. During this period of time working in the district headquarters, the hard work had diverted their attention. It had more or less soothed the hurt they had suffered from the Tsingy army. Although it was very tiring, the girls quite liked the feeling of working on their own. It was much more fulfilling than staying in the backyard. Hearing that they could receive a monthly salary, they were even more tempted. Some of them agreed on the spot. Others also agreed after some hesitation. Without Jiang Pingji, they would have long been tortured to death by the Tsingy army. Even if they did not die, their family property would have fallen into the hands of other clansmen. Lonely women who had lost their chastity could hardly survive in today's world. The young district magistrate in front of them gave them a chance. Only fools would not seize it. If they had a position in the district magistrate, the shameless elders in the clan would not be able to force them to do anything. Without much effort, Jiang Pingji recruited another 23 literate and good employees. They were deeply grateful to her. They would not complain no matter how late they worked. They rushed to do any paperwork. Chapter 448. The maids in the residence always treated Xianxia carefully. Of course she did not like maids. Qiguanrang did not think that children were delicate. Not only would he pat her but to urge her to crawl forward, but he would also tempt her with brightly colored things. Therefore Xianxia liked to play with Qiguanrang. He was a good playmate. She crawled quickly with her hands and feet, giggling non-stop. Sparkling saliva hung from the corner of her mouth, and her smile was very bright. She looks like you and sister-in-law, but this character. How do I put it, they are not alike at all. Qiguanrang could not imagine Feng Jin crawling while giggling. The key was that this little girl had a bad temper. It was okay to tease her occasionally, but if she got angry she would argue with you directly. She was willful and overbearing. Feng Jin buried his head in the files. His daughter was playing happily with Qiguanrang, which made him feel sour and pitiful. She is just a child who doesn't know anything. What character can you see? Feng Jin said as he put the organized files in the designated position. Then he took out another scroll and slowly spread it on the table. He glanced at Qiguanrang from the corner of his eyes. This guy was holding his glass and waving it in front of Xianxia. Then he led the little girl to crawl from the north side of the government office to the south side. His daughter was still giggling and crawling over. The entire mats of the government hall were wiped by her petite body. Who said that? Don't old people say that 3 years old can tell one's age? There is not much difference between 3 years old and 3 months old. Anyway, your daughter's character is not gentle and virtuous. Qiguanrang usually liked to keep a straight face, and even looked at people with dark eyes. However, when he played with Xianxia he showed some gentleness and pampering. This was seen by an acquaintance. How could he not find it rare? Feng Jin almost broke the brush in his hand. What did he mean by his daughter's character was not gentle and virtuous? Which woman of the Feng family was not educated, gentle, virtuous, intelligent and beautiful? Qiguanrang did not tease Xianxia anymore. He let her grab his sleeve and climb on top of him, wiping his sleeve with her saliva. Come, you must be tired. Let uncle hug you and rest. He did not mind the dirt. He picked up the giggling Xianxia and found a comfortable position for her. He said nonchalantly, in today's world it's not wrong for a woman to be stronger. Do you still remember reading the 4 self-accomplishment classics for women? That's what they look like when they're too gentle and virtuous. Feng Jin was taken aback. He was rendered speechless by Qiguanrang's words. I hope that my daughter can be as active and lively as Xianxia. When she grows up I'll hire a martial arts teacher for her. Who knew when the world would calm down? The daughter that he had raised with his own hands was the apple of his eye. He could not bear to hurt her at all. For example, Huayu, when Xianxia was bothering you, didn't you still secretly bring her in your sleeve? However, when a woman grows up she has to get married and have children. This is the way of reproduction as well as the natural order of things. As a father, how many years could he accompany her? Children should walk their own paths in the future. If they were stronger and braver they would get hurt less in the future. Don't you agree, little Xianxia? Xianxia did not understand these words, but she knew that Qiguanrang was talking to her, so she giggled. Feng Jin was silent for a long time. After a while he said, isn't it still early? 16 years at most. Qiguanrang's face was sullen. He pursed his lips. How old was sister-in-law when you married her? Feng Jin was suddenly speechless. He was in a terrible mood. He did not know if it was because he felt that his daughter was too short by his side, or because of Qiguanrang's words. Hey Xiaoyu, why aren't you saying anything today? Qiguanrang sat on the ground and teased Xianxia. Suka happened to walk past him. Suka sneered. I don't have a daughter. Asking a man who did not even have a daughter to participate in such a sad topic, was he trying to stab his heart? Qiguanrang secretly pursed his lips. Xianxia, who was in his arms, giggled and wanted to stand up. Then she pulled his hair crown. Which family's child is this? Jiang Pingji was dressed in a short brown shirt and had a windproof cloak draped over her shoulders. She looked like she had just come out of the carpentry workshop. As soon as she entered the door, she saw Qiguanrang sitting on the ground holding a fair and tender baby. She could not tell that this guy had the potential to be a nanny. Judging by her appearance, she's from Huayu's family? Qiguanrang held Xianxia and bowed slightly. My lord, this is Xianxia from Huayu's family. Xianxia did not care who came. She grabbed his hair crown and did not let go. She screamed and prepared to exert force. After a while, A pair of strong, lean hands grabbed her under her armpits and lifted her up. But she was still holding on to the man's hair, and her two chubby paws refused to let go. They were in a silent stalemate. Qiguan Rang reluctantly took off the hair crown and stuffed it into his sleeve. She would not be able to grab it this way. It's quite heavy. Jiang Pingji held the child in her arms and weighed him. He was much heavier than other children of the same age. Feng Jin's face darkened. Chongqing, don't mess with the Lord. Come to Daddy. If Chongqing messed with Qiguan Rang, he could still remain calm. If she messed with Jiang Pingji, it would not do according to the hierarchy. Don't be so serious. Chongqing and I are quite fated. I was the one who named her. Jiang Pingji teased Chongqing and pinched her bones. She was indeed a very strong baby. Feng Jin looked at her nervously for a while. When he saw that Chongqing did not cry, he slowly felt relieved. Jiang Pingji pinched Chongqing's chubby face. Looking at this girl, I feel that there will be a joyous occasion today. Qiguan Rang smiled and said, that's strange. This child was very noisy and lively before. Why is she so obedient when she's with the Lord? Jiang Pingji was not surprised. There was a slight smile on her face. It's normal. Children are very sensitive to auras. A child's perception of auras was incomparable to an adult's. Chongqing dared to mess with Qiguan Rang, but she did not dare to mess with Jiang Pingji. This was the survival instinct that small animals were born with. Zhou Xian. Streamer, was this child born in the earthquake? Ren Xiandao, wow, Xiaobei looks so cute. She's chubby and has nice facial features. Daily Huangbu Kingshan, look at who Chongqing's parents are. The parents have good genes, so the child can't be too bad. Jiang Pingji was distracted as she glanced at the bullet screen. Her cheeks were flushed with a milky fragrance. Pop, Jiang Pingji turned her head to look. Little Chongqing was giggling. Her adorable appearance had captured a large number of fans. Naughty. Jiang Pingji gently tapped the tip of her nose. Chongqing did not understand. She hugged her finger and wanted to stuff it into her mouth. Ah woo, Jiang Pingji's fingertips touched her teeth. She wanted to pull her finger out. At that moment, heavy footsteps came from outside. Meng Hun knelt outside the door and panted. My lord, there are nearly 20,000 troops and horses 20 miles outside the city. Their intentions are unknown. The atmosphere at the scene froze. Subconsciously, Feng Jin looked nervously at Jiang Pingji and Chongqing in her arms. All the muscles in his body were ready to move as if he wanted to catch something. Jiang Pingji frowned. She lowered her head and gently pulled her finger out. She kissed the little girl's forehead in a comforting manner. You're tuning in to the Zhou Xian's Legacy YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.